us in the studio, the former Attorney General, constitutional experts too.
Hello, Tom.
This is a moment that often is not held in, I suppose, such wider psyche amongst the British people. We tend to think VE Day, job done. But there was so much British territory in the Far East, so many sort of totem elements of what Britain was and our global reach, that this really mattered.
Oh, it really mattered. And Tom, the phenomenon that you're describing about what some people have called the forgotten war is not a modern phenomenon. Even in the years after World War II, there were those that described the forgotten army. There was a suggestion that a leading general of the region, a British general of the region, Viscount Slim, had made some reference to a forgotten army. But of course, the service that those men performed for their country was of the most considerable importance, both strategic importance, but also moral and psychological importance for all of the Allied powers. The losses, by the way, were significant, and even after VE Day, thousands of British servicemen lost their lives in the continuing conflict. And many, many thousands more would have lost their lives had the conflict not been brought to an end by the American actions in August 1945.
Why do you think it is so forgotten, Michael? I mean, I watched a documentary the other night where some of the very few surviving veterans, incredibly brave men, were talking about what they experienced, and the stories they were telling were chilling. Beyond evil.
Oh, yes.
But so why is this so forgotten compared to VE Day?
I think partly, it's difficult to say, Dawn, but I think partly this is because the conflict in Europe was closer to home to the British. The Nazis were the ones that had been hitting London and hitting throughout, in fact, the United Kingdom during the Blitz. And people were so war-weary, they were so exhausted from conflict, that when the opportunity came in VE Day to mark the end of the war at that time in Europe, I think they took that opportunity, and understandably so. But I don't think it's right to say that it was forgotten. It might feel that way. It might have felt that way afterwards, but there were many sacrifices.
I wonder if there might too have been a political element here. There had been a general election 2 months earlier. The Conservative Party was talking, of course, about how the war must be won, but the Labour Party was saying, no, win the peace. And that's what won the election, the surprisingly large general election victory for Clement Attlee and the Labour Party.
And Churchill kicked out, of course.
Churchill, of course, kicked out in what many people think of as a bit of a surprise, although there were some trends in what few polls we had back then. But there's also something deeper here. The places that were defeated throughout the course of that war and then won back: Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaya, Burma, Borneo, the Solomon Islands, British territory, where the sort of myth of the British Empire was broken. The fall of Singapore, such a poignant moment in the course of this
Probably
war.
our biggest... the feeling was that Singapore, the loss of Singapore, was one of our biggest defeats of World War II.
And to some extent, that's what broke the myth of the British Empire. After the fall of Singapore, this area of the world over which Britain once exerted so much dominance was forever broken.
That's right, Tom, and it's actually one of those things that that concerned Churchill a great deal in the years after the war. A regret that he felt was the loss of empire. He was one of the last old-school Victorian imperialists, of course, and he believed in that fervently. The reality is that it marked the decline of the British Empire, and of course it marked the new order, the post-World War II order, which is what people were voting for, as you've pointed out.
Which is why this is such an interesting memorial. In some way, a victory, of course,
Yes.
that the Allies won, defeated the Axis powers. Such military bravery and victory. But also for Britain, in some strange way, a loss too.
Well, it was a loss, and in fact, it was a loss that took a great deal of time to get over. Dawn's point about the deprivations, in fact, the torture, the cruelty, the inhumanity that had been suffered by Allied personnel in the Far East under Japanese capture, tens of thousands died as a result of their captivity. They were cruelly malnourished, they were tortured, there were summary executions, they were denied medical treatment. Many died of blackwater fever, which is an aggravated form of malaria. There were stories of sores, leg sores that were a foot long because they couldn't be treated. People working in extreme heat and humidity in jungle conditions on the Burma Railway. In fact, one of the memorials in Staffordshire at the Arboretum is actually constructed from part of the original wooden beams of the Burma Railway to commemorate the sacrifice of those who fell.
Just extraordinary stories. So, Michael, do stay with us. We will be back to this, of course, but we can take you live now to Joint Base Andrews, just outside Washington, D.C., where President Donald Trump is about to depart for his historic meeting with Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska. This, the airbase where they keep all of the planes that become Air Force One. Of course, it becomes Air Force One as soon as Donald Trump steps on board that plane. And we're given to understand that we're looking at the plane there that Donald Trump is about to board.
A relatively short flight, and of course Alaska important because it was once owned by Russia, which sold it to America for, I understand, a very
about $7 million.
a very small amount of money comparatively for the land mass. And it's also one of the places that you can actually see Russian territory from America. There is an island not far offshore that actually belongs to Russia still, and there are many Russian Orthodox churches in Anchorage still, and many small Russian communities there. So a very historic meeting in a very historic place. However, let's talk to Christopher Hope now about how important this meeting actually is and what we hope to achieve from it.
Well, that's much we don't know. We do know it's very, very important. It's historically significant. It's the first time that the two leaders of Russia and America have met since 2018. The last time they met in Helsinki, it was, again, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and anything can happen. Now, in the past 24 hours, we've heard a bit more from the US President Donald Trump. He said there's a 25% chance the summit fails. What does success look like? Success probably looks like an agreement for a second summit where we'll have Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukraine leader, sitting there in the same room as Vladimir Putin, probably with Donald Trump refereeing, and then maybe a movement towards peace and an end to the killing. But the terms of that peace is what everyone's worrying about, rightly so.
Is this ever going to be a case of the two sides actually agreeing, though? Because from what, I mean, Putin wants to control Ukraine. He wants to install his own government in Ukraine, where obviously Zelensky is fighting against that, and he doesn't want to concede any of the land which was invaded illegally, lest any of us forget that. So Trump is going to have to be some kind of miracle worker to actually weave a deal that keeps both sides relatively happy.
He is, and of course he is a deal maker, and he's quite used to having two sides which appear to be completely impossible to bring them together. He sees this as a chance to do it. Of course, he's eyeing up that Nobel Peace Prize. He's trying to do similar sorting out the world's conflicts on a much lower level around the world. Also, we're seeing that repeatedly in his meetings in the White House. So, you know, it may happen. I mean, he has been playing down the importance of this visit. Again, it's about a second meeting following on. But the concern is already from London and from EU countries is what is the terms of the deal? Will they try and swap territory over the heads of what Ukraine wants? And the UK told us on Monday that the only deal that is acceptable to London is one that's acceptable to Kyiv as well.
Well, this is... Go on, Tom.
Well, I was just going to say this is such a flying visit, both metaphorically
Quite literally.
and literally. Donald Trump, it's around 7 a.m. over there in Maryland, where we can see Air Force One preparing to take off. It will land in Anchorage in, what is it, around 5 hours' time. And then they have a very, very short amount of time to actually bash something out before Donald Trump flies back again this very evening.
That's right. So the timing is 8 p.m. We expect the summit to start.
That's UK time.
UK time. So it's all UK time for our viewers and listeners. All UK time. We'll have as much as we can on GBNews, of course. The summit happens. There's two interpreters in the room, the two principals, and that's it. No one knows what's discussed. Then there's meetings between the officials. We see Sergei Lavrov is there, the Russian foreign minister. There'll be the counterparts from the US government there. and then there'll be press conferences, either definitely individually with Trump, possibly together with Putin. We saw that in Helsinki back in 2018, and then anything can happen. And whether Putin speaks English or requires an interpreter, if there's an interpreter, it will slow down the dynamics. But all the bonhomie, the shaking hands, this is difficult for people to stomach in the UK and in the EU. Only on Monday, we're told by the PM's official spokesman that he couldn't throw, we as a country couldn't trust Putin as far as we could throw him.
Well, he does have previous history, obviously, for going back on his word. It's very interesting, though, that apart from the two men themselves, the only other people in the room, there's no aides, there's no advisors. It is literally just their interpreter.
And that's quite common. That is quite common to have private time together. The problem is, anything can be agreed. We don't know what's going to be said, and it happened in Helsinki as well. Yeah, I mean, it is a very, very uncertain time here, and that's why we've seen the performative politics this week of this 3-second embrace from a very untactile Keir Starmer. He doesn't do this kind of thing much.
Watching that video was very interesting. Zelensky put out his hand for a handshake, and then Starmer opened both of his arms to hold this embrace. He's obviously been told to do this, that he knows the symbolism.
I think he knows to do it, Tom. I mean, he did it with when Zelensky came on a previous occasion. He made a big thing of walking him out, and he did say in the interview after that, I was going to show this guy out of my house. I mean, he knows we're all watching and filming and we'll be interpreting. And, yes, we're watching and discussing it, but really those images are really aimed at Trump and Putin.
But for now, we've seen Keir Starmer and Donald Trump on relatively good terms. They call each other their friends. They agree they've got different politics in many ways, but it's always a cordial relationship. Could that end tonight?
Yes.
Could there be a real rupture between the American position and the Anglo-Ukrainian position, the European position, whatever you want to call it? 30
countries were on a conference call with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump on Wednesday. Yes, if a deal is done over the heads and imposed on Ukraine, that will be a rupture, and it'll be a disastrous rupture, because we as a country, the European Union countries, Ukraine, they need the US backstop, the security backstop. So we need to have America on side with whatever deal is agreed. Going back to those timings, we are expecting at this press conference late tonight, maybe I would say 10 or 11. As you say, he flies out 2:30 in the morning, so he's not there for long.
But speaking of going back to that conference you mentioned, Christopher, I mean, Trump said that Putin would face severe consequences if he did not agree to end the war in Ukraine at this very meeting. So if Trump walks away from this with no agreement to end the war, what does severe consequences mean?
Well, what's so discombobulating is he says that at one point, yes, he says severe consequences, and then he downplays the importance of the summit and says actually it's about a second summit. This is the kind of the pre-summit to the main summit, when Zelensky's in the same room as Putin for the first time since war broke out. So yes, it's unclear, and we are watching this as observers, and particularly I think Zelensky being an observer is so difficult to understand. I mean, across the board, Kevin Badenoch told GBNews on Tuesday Zelensky should be there, and of course that's the position of the UK government.
Michael, let's bring you back in it. So Michael Ellis is still with us, constitutional expert. I mean, what do you make of this summit? How important is it, or is it more performative now?
Well, I think it is very important, partly because President Trump is so unpredictable. But let's bring a historical perspective in. One of the things that are really worrying some people about this is the resemblance it has historically to 1938 and Czechoslovakia. Because that was a rather infamous occasion, a Munich conference, where the Allies sought to sort of stitch up the Nazi Germans at the time by basically saying, well, we'll give you a piece of Czechoslovakia, as it was then. And Czechoslovakia wasn't in the room. And so that, of course, led to a certain sequence of events, and many people would argue that that was an encouragement to Germany, Nazi Germany, to continue as it later did. There's perhaps a warning from history about the danger of not involving a country that you're actually talking about. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
We will indeed. Well, as we wait for Donald Trump to board his plane, for this plane to fly its 7.5-hour journey to Anchorage, Alaska, for a summit that is expected to last maybe 7 hours. More time in the air than actually on the ground there in Anchorage, quite possibly. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come on today's programme.
I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future.
As we have just been discussing, it's their first face-to-face meeting in 6 years and the first US-Russia summit on American soil in over a decade. President Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare to hold crunch talks in Alaska. But will it end with a framework for peace in Ukraine or just more deadlock?
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's like a death.
You can say, oh, what if, but it's gone.
the whole of the community is so sad, and they're slowly getting angry now.
We're going to fight every corner we can to get justice for what's happened here.
2 years ago, a community was in grief. Today, they're more determined than ever. When the Crooked House was gutted by a suspected arson attack and then illegally demolished, the people of the Black Country felt like it was a blitz on their history. Originally built in the 18th century, the pub suffered subsidence because of mining in the area, giving its unique appearance that visitors fell in love with. In February last year, South Staffordshire Council served an enforcement order on the owners ATE Farms, ordering them to rebuild the pub within 3 years. After appealing the order and a subsequent decision from the High Court, the planning enforcement inquiry will have to wait until any potential criminal proceedings have concluded. Investigations by the police are ongoing. For the campaigners who want to see this landmark rebuilt, the passion is only stronger, as Paul Turner from Save the Crooked House explains.
Well, we all felt it was ours. You know, we're Black Country people. We felt that, you know, this is our area, this is our iconic pub. This is people come from miles around and from all over the world. All of a sudden, just like that, it's gone. We're always very proud of it. Although it's had different owners over the years, it was always ours as a community. Got a lot to think about if the Crooked House is ever going to be built. There's lots of legal issues. The site isn't ours. We can't rebuild the Crooked House, so it's very, very complicated legally. But we know what our end goal is, and how we actually get to that end goal is going to be a little bit complicated. But that's we're still focusing on that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Wake up with a familiar face. She's back on breakfast television. Penny Smith returns.
Miss me? Well, I'm here, and I brought the coffee.
And we're reuniting to brighten your morning.
It's just like old times, only better.
So join Penny and me next Monday and Tuesday only on GB News Breakfast.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past midday. Now let's return to the commemorations happening across the country to mark the 80th anniversary of VJ Day and the official end to the Second World War.
Joining us now are reporters from around the country as the nation marks VJ Day. Sophie Reap at the Field Memorial Arboretum, Dougie Beattie in Lisburn. I think we're going to Dougie first.
Yes, good afternoon, Dawn. This is a celebration, and as well as that, it is also remembering those that died in the Second World War, particularly in the Far East. And it has quite a story to it here in Northern Ireland, because I'm standing in Lisburn, and the sometimes good comes out of wars. And Frank Pantridge served 3 years as a prisoner of war and realised that men were dying of cardiac arrest, and he came up with quite a good invention that we all know to this day because of that. And joining me is the Mayor of Lisburn. What did he make?
Well, we are very humbled here in Lisburn and honoured that Frank Partridge actually created the defibrillator, which is used locally in Northern Ireland, not just in Northern Ireland, but all around the world. Frank was born in Hillsborough and he went to school here locally in Hillsborough, and today we have an exhibition to honour his legacy.
Baroness Anderson, you are the Northern Ireland spokesman in the House of Lords. What do you think about wars and how much comes out of it, Medic?
Look, we need to remember the horror of war as well as some of the incredible advancements that come out at times of war by necessity. We're talking today about defibrillators. Second World War also gave us penicillin, a story that was covered in terms of antibiotics yesterday. It is extraordinary, but what we can never ever forget is the personal price that was paid by Dr. Partridge in terms of being a prisoner of war, the ultimate sacrifice that was made, the commemoration today by those that passed away to give us our freedoms, but also their families and friends who lost their loved ones and who continue to remember the impact and be proud of what their families did, but ensured that we have the freedom today that we need to celebrate and protect and cherish every single day.
Well, I have to let them go because there is a commemoration starting here. Thank you very much for joining me. If you want to step that way, you can go and join the procession. Yes, and it just shows you, who would have thought Frank Partridge, taken prisoner of war, 3 years in a Japanese war camp. He was made to walk 20 miles in his bare feet, realising that men were dying of heart attacks in that intensive heat and stress, makes a defibrillator when he comes home, and we see it the whole way across the world to this very day. Commemorations have been going on in the garrison city of Lisburn. This morning we have had a silence, we have had the wreaths put down in place, and now it is about trying to look at what those people that fought for us left behind. Not all of them were medical geniuses. Many gave their lives in different ways, and it is being remembered very well here today in Lisburn.
Well, Doogie, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that. Let's go over to Sophie Reaper now.
Well, you're joining us here this afternoon in the Fylde Memorial Arboretum and Community Woodland, and you can probably notice behind me that things perhaps aren't as big or as grand as they might be at the National Memorial Arboretum, but the sentiment here is just as special and just as big, as people here in this community today have gathered to mark 80 years of VJ Day. And we're in this part of the community woodland that is dedicated to all those people from Blackpool and the surrounding Fylde area that received the Burma Star, and each of those people commemorated here with their own individual plaque, and you can see on them perhaps laying today are yellow, white and green flowers, and that is because those are the colours of the Burma Star Association. So very, very specific and very, very poignant on this day. And at the centre of it all here in this particular part of the garden, you'll notice this lovely obelisk which holds on it the Kohima, which I'll read to you now. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. And that, of course, is a reference to the incredible sacrifice made by all those who served. And we celebrate and commemorate them today. Now, earlier, I actually got the opportunity to speak to a 102-year-old Army veteran who remembers VJ Day. And she told me what she can recall. Here's what she had to say.
I remember that I was in the army and we were all doing our usual jobs, and then we found out that it was time to all have a rejoicing time.
And I imagine you must have felt some real sense of relief.
Oh yes, definitely. Everybody knew that they'd be going home soon, and that life, we hoped, would be better for everybody.
And 80 years on, how important is it to you that people never forget the sacrifice that was made by all those who served 80 years ago?
It's very important indeed, and I think it should always be remembered. After all, so many young men and women gave their lives.
And if you had a message today on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day for our viewers at home, what would that message be?
I would say that everybody just get together and do as much as they can to keep peace.
And what an important message here today on the 80th anniversary of victory over Japan. The message of peace and the message of commemorations that we today remember they who gave their lives, they sacrificed themselves for our today. An incredibly poignant day here in Fylde.
Sophie Reaper, thanks indeed for bringing us that, and to Doogie Beattie before Sophie too.
Indeed. OK, now we are moving on there. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show.
Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And that reform includes the electoral system. That reform includes the abomination that is the House of Lords.
Yes, he once said he would scrap it, but now Nigel Farage wants in. With 4 MPs, 10 councils and rising poll numbers, the Reform Party leader is demanding the right to send his own peers to the House of Lords.
But after the break, President Trump is scheduled to leave the Washington airport and board Air Force One, heading to those talks in Alaska with Vladimir Putin very shortly. You can see the plane sitting on the tarmac there waiting for him. We will be there with all the latest on that one. But that after your news headlines.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Our headlines. The King and Queen have joined veterans for a memorial service on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day. Charles and Camilla, along with the Prime Minister, laid wreaths at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay their respects to those who served in the Far East and Pacific during the Second World War. Donald Trump has shared a 2-word message on social media ahead of his meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. It simply says, high stakes. He's scheduled to leave the White House imminently for those talks in Alaska. Suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder after he called for far-right protesters' throats to be cut at an anti-racism rally in the wake of rioting following the Southport murders. All flights at Manchester Airport were halted earlier this morning following a collision between 2 EasyJet planes which clipped wings while taxiing to the runway. An investigation is underway. And social media influencers will be used to help the government highlight the risks of travelling abroad for cosmetic surgery. The new campaign on TikTok will explain how tummy tucks and dental treatments can go wrong overseas. That's your headlines. A full bulletin coming up at 1 o'clock.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday, today dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, and increasingly some low cloud starting to lap onto the eastern coast of England as the day progresses. Hot sunshine elsewhere. And although the cooler breeze across parts of northern and eastern UK will bring about average temperatures, high teens, low 20s, we'll still see much higher than average temperatures, high 20s and possible 31 Celsius across southern parts of the UK. Meanwhile, there will still be 1 or 2 showers developing across parts of eastern Scotland, but nowhere near on the scale of Thursday's downpours. And most places will be dry, albeit rather cloudy, especially for eastern and central Scotland. Some sunshine for the Western Isles as well as for Northern Ireland, but plenty of sunshine there for much of England and Wales, although some coastal parts of the North Sea there seeing some cloud. And that cloud will tend to creep back in after dark. In fact, it will become fairly extensive across the eastern half of the UK, certainly, perhaps reaching as far as the West Midlands or even East Wales overnight. And under that cloud, temperatures will stay at 16 or 17 Celsius. Even with the clear spells elsewhere, it's still going to be a warm night and a pleasant start to the weekend for many of us, although a lot of cloud will persist during the morning, especially for much of eastern Scotland, into eastern England as well. It will lift and break, but I think some places will keep the cloud into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere, still hot in the southwest, cooler elsewhere.
Crash Law 24.
sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Those travelling on the A725 northbound should be aware that the on-slip from Belsey Hill roundabout is closed due to planned maintenance. Diversions are clearly marked, but expect extended journey times. In Surrey, a broken-down vehicle has closed one lane on the M25 anti-clockwise between Junction 6 and Junction 5, causing slowdowns. Be cautious on the A34 northbound in West Berkshire, where a collision has caused lane closures and delays of up to 1 hour. And on the trains, expect disruptions with Chiltern Railways and cross-country services between Leamington Spa and Banbury. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past midday. Now, Donald Trump is set to leave the White House shortly and head to Alaska, where he'll go face-to-face with Vladimir Putin for the first time in 6 years, as the president tries to hammer out a deal to end the war in Ukraine.
As you can see now, live footage of our Air Force One. Well, it will be when the president gets on it, waiting on the tarmac to head to Alaska. Ahead of the meetings, Trump said last night that the Russian president won't mess around with him.
Well, we're joined now by the constitutional expert, former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis, and our very own political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, this is such a sort of fly-past meeting, in a way. He's going to spend more time on board this plane than he does sitting down in Anchorage, Alaska, with the Russians. What is going to come of today?
We don't know, but it is also it's a day of symbols. It's a day of the first meeting on US soil, but for Putin, I think, for a long time, possibly well over a decade, I imagine. And the first meeting between the two leaders of the US and Russia since 2018. That happened in Helsinki. The same cast was there then. It was Donald Trump meeting Vladimir Putin. I'm looking here at images on social media now of Sergei Lavrov arriving. He's wearing a CCCP jumper.
The USSR.
The USSR in Russian. So that is indicative, and you've been saying so on social media yourself, Tom, of what Russia feels about Ukraine. It believes it's part of its history, and that's indeed justified to a degree the invasion. And to wear that shirt arriving for a summit with Alaska, that is all about symbolism. We saw yesterday the 3-second hug with Prime Minister Keir Starmer with Zelensky. It's all about how it looks.
I should just say 2015 was the last time that Putin visited the United States. He was in New York for the UN General Assembly, but had a brief meeting with then President Obama. But of course this was after the seizure of Crimea, and the meeting was reportedly a frosty one.
And that context matters because today we had John Healey, who's the UK Defence Secretary, attacking Nigel Farage for saying, back in 2014, I think it was 2014, when Mr Farage said he admired the strength of a leader like Putin. Back then, these things were said, and he wasn't the complete pariah that Putin is today.
No, absolutely, and they called him a Putin apologist, didn't they?
But then everyone, I mean, if they were back in the day, you know, the Tory government was trying to get quite close to Russia, but certainly in the noughties.
But didn't actually back down. But isn't it interesting, Michael, that this meeting can probably only take place in America because America doesn't recognise the International Criminal Court. So many other countries, Putin could be arrested as soon as he got off the plane.
Well, that's right, but I mean, they should try it. Let's put it that way, because I don't think that would be a very easy thing to achieve. The reality is, to back up Chris's point, as he was just saying, actually, we in the United Kingdom welcomed Vladimir Putin on a state visit. You know, if you remember way back. You know, the reality is, at that time, it was different. And now, of course, relations are extremely frosty. But there's something that Churchill famously said after World War II, when they criticised him for meeting with the then Soviet Union. And he said, there's no point having peace talks with friends. And what I think the Trump people would probably claim is that we have a dispute here in progress, we have warring factions, someone's got to try and settle that dispute and get these two talking. And just a frosty sort of breach maintaining a block between them won't actually resolve anything. And that is an argument that I think the Trump people would put.
Isn't it an interesting point that the red carpet was rolled out for Vladimir Putin in 2003 in this country, Tony Blair hosting him in a grand state visit? Of course, Russia was brought into the international fold. It joined the G8 as it was then. The Americans shared their space station, which was originally going to be the space station Freedom, and instead it became the International Space Station to incorporate the Russians too. Almost every sort of element of society, the West tried to bring Russia in, and yet that runs entirely contrary to Vladimir Putin's narrative today, that he was shunned, that the West was out to get him, that he had to sort of secure his own buffer for states and all the rest of it. But, I mean, history doesn't really stack up.
It doesn't back him up, and he's the one that's caused that breach, of course, with his invasion.
Timing, the Russia invaded Crimea on February the 20th, 2014. That same year, after that, the Queen met Putin at the D-Day commemorations in 2014. Yeah. And that's the same period when Nigel Farage said about the admired a strong leader. I mean, people aren't having a go at the Queen for saying that, are they?
Now, I should say that we're just showing on television what Donald Trump has posted on his Truth social network there. High stakes, and is that 4 exclamation marks? Capital letters, of course, 3 exclamation marks.
Don't exaggerate there, Tom Harwood. There's only 3.
Only 3.
I'm afraid to say we are being played here by Donald Trump. He says earlier today, overnight, maybe the 25% chance that the summit fails. He's saying it's high stakes. You know, he's having it both ways, Michael.
He knows how the media loves these things. But look, so do the Russians. Sergei Lavrov has been around on the diplomatic circuit for a very long time, and he is a wily character. Arriving wearing a Soviet Union jumper is not an accident, right? He is sending a signal there. It's provocative, and it's deliberately provocative. It's no accident. It is all about optics, but that works for both sides. The meeting won't have to be very long because, as Donald Trump said in the Oval Office a few hours ago, I'll know in the first 5 minutes if this is going to be successful or not, because he will sort of play the headmaster here with 2 warring factions, and he will say, are we going to have a deal here or not? And he'll soon be able to tell. That's his prediction anyway.
It's worth also asking, what does Putin want from this? We know what we want from this, which is peace in Ukraine, on Ukraine's terms. What does Trump want? That's a question. But Putin, going what the Kremlin spokesman said, he says the pair will discuss the huge untapped potential of US-Russia ties. That, to me, is oil and gas. That is the Arctic Passage. That is the Arctic, the seabed. That is a lot of other stuff in play for Russia because they have got the economy is not in great shape. They want to do deals. So, yes, Ukraine is a big issue and a huge issue for Ukrainians and the UK and Europe, but there's also bigger issues at stake for Russia.
There is, and as well as the minerals, the earth minerals in Ukraine and in Alaska as well, which were also on the table between Russia and America. Zelensky's almost got nothing to do with this. There's a lifting of sanctions on Russian aircraft parts, which could be very lucrative for the American manufacturer Boeing. So, I mean, there's lots to be done in this deal, isn't there?
And all of that is in play. So when we talk about, it's not narrowly, well, it is about Ukraine, but it's not just about Ukraine, narrowly on the issue of sovereignty over territory.
And this is why the diplomatic circuit, and especially in the European Union, is so nervous about this meeting, because they fear that there will be other criteria that President Trump will be looking at rather than the hegemony of Zelensky's Ukraine. And they'll be worried that Donald Trump's priorities will be rather more on the economic front.
He's a businessman. I mean, this is what Donald Trump does and has always done. So, Michael, the big question here is what happens if Putin says, right, no peace, I want this bits of Ukraine, that's it?
Well, of course, the President Trump is very difficult to predict. It's quite possible that he will just walk out if he doesn't feel that he's getting what he wants. But what I think is of grave concern is that people worry about appeasement. There's a real fear that what Putin understands, the only language he understands as a former KGB agent, and a man, of course, who has been not afraid to use violence, is a dangerous person.
Well, we're going to jump for a moment from the United States there in Maryland to check the weather a little closer to home. Here's the European weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine? Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Temperatures easing a little bit in Spain and Portugal, but it's still going to be pretty hot for the next few days. Pretty humid in Italy with the threat of a few scattered heavy thundery showers. Dry and sunny in Spain and Portugal. As I said, though, temperatures just dropping a little bit here over the next few days. Could be quite breezy for Sicily and parts of northern Tunisia. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Greek islands as well, but plenty of sunshine likely here. Continued risk of a few showers for Italy and Croatia.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record, just like week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 1. Now, EasyJet have confirmed that 2 of its aircraft came into contact while taxiing this morning at Manchester Airport. Well, the collision, which caused the wings of both planes to clip, resulted in passenger disruptions and a brief closure of the runway.
Yeah, this happened very early this morning, as you can see there. These are obviously, everyone's got their phones out and we're taking pictures of it, so you can see one of the wingtips there that was damaged. Thankfully, no one was injured and the airport was open very, very quickly, and the planes were evacuated. The question here, Tom, is how did it happen? How did those planes get so close? Even when they are, what do planes do? They don't park, do they?
Look, we've all been there. You know, it's been a heavy night the night before. You get in the car, you're a bit bleary-eyed, and and you accidentally scrape. I'm joking. I'm joking.
so
I've never
glad
done
you're not
that.
an airline pilot.
I've never done that.
No.
But my goodness me, I mean, this is the stuff out of some sort of spoof sketch show, you know.
Yeah, it is even when you're sort of like, you know, taxiing into the bay where you're picking your passenger up and dropping them off. You don't get that close.
No, you really don't.
I don't understand what happens.
I thought that there was sort of, you know, air traffic control. Maybe they're just controlling people from the sky.
Maybe they were out on the lash with the pilots. What do you reckon,
surely
Tom?
there's more. It's more than just one pilot who's sort of doing the drive. Like there must be a series of cascading errors, one after another, that allowed two planes to come this close to one another. Thank goodness it was on the ground, not in the air.
Well, that would be slightly worrying. And I'm not an aviation expert, obviously, but isn't the fuel stored in the wings? That's the scary bit, isn't it? I mean, Michael, who obviously knows more than I do about these things, Michael Ellis's still with us here. The fuel is stored in the wings, so that could have actually been...
It's quite dangerous, even at low speed, of course, because you worry about either a leak of fuel onto the tarmac, onto the runway, or an explosion. So even a low-impact incident, and I think you can see an official picking up a piece of the wing there, can be quite dangerous.
Well, from one aeroplane to another, this one not coming into contact with any other airplanes. Of course, Air Force One is due to take off there from Maryland, from Joint Base Andrews. We'll be flying over to Alaska. We'll bring you all the latest as Donald Trump heads to meet Vladimir Putin.
After the weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday, today dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, and increasingly some low cloud starting to lap onto the eastern coast of England as the day progresses. Hot sunshine elsewhere, and although the cooler breeze across parts of northern and eastern UK will bring about average temperatures, high teens, low 20s, we'll still see much higher than average temperatures, high 20s and possible 31 Celsius across southern parts of the UK. Meanwhile, there will still be one or two showers developing across parts of eastern Scotland, but nowhere near on the scale of Thursday's downpours. And most places will be dry, albeit rather cloudy, especially for eastern and central Scotland. Some sunshine for the Western Isles as well as for Northern Ireland, but plenty of sunshine there for much of England and Wales, although some coastal parts of the North Sea there seeing some cloud. And that cloud will tend to creep back in after dark. In fact, it will become fairly extensive across the eastern half of the UK, certainly, perhaps reaching as far as the West Midlands or even East Wales overnight. And under that cloud, temperatures will stay at 16 or 17 Celsius. Even with the clear spells elsewhere, it's still going to be a warm night and a pleasant start to the weekend for many of us, although a lot of cloud will persist during the morning, especially for much of eastern Scotland, into eastern England as well. It will lift and break, but I think some places will keep the cloud into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere, still hot in the southwest, cooler elsewhere.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. We're taking you straight to Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, just a few short miles from Washington, D.C., where the motorcade of President Donald Trump is arriving at Air Force One, ahead of his journey to meet with Vladimir Putin.
Yes, it will be a short flight up to Anchorage in Alaska, where the meeting is due to take place UK time this evening, around about 8 o'clock, we think. It'll be literally a flying visit. We don't believe that Trump is spending that much time at the meeting. It will just be the two men in a room with their interpreters, no aides, no advisors, and they are there, obviously, to discuss peace in Ukraine. That is the conversation on the table. Whether that actually results in a satisfactory answer for Zelensky, who obviously is not at the meeting, which is the main point here.
Now, I think we can see the president there walking up the stairs. just to get onto that magnificent and large presidential plane. He'll be in the air for around 7 hours and 40 minutes. He's just there waving to those on the ground, to the media, and of course some of the armed forces who operate Joint Base Andrews there. It's a journey he's done many, many times to go from the White House to Joint Base Andrews before he goes off on one of his many visits. I think he's flown around really probably more than just about any other president in his first 200 days in office or so. But this, a very significant, historic meeting to be taking place on the other side of the United States of America, in the joint 50th state to join the Union.
Well, and obviously Alaska has a very, very interesting history. It used to be owned by Russia. Russia sold it to the United States for what wasn't a huge amount of money when you consider the land mass of Alaska. It's the least populated state in the United States. And Anchorage, there's an island off of Anchorage, which is actually Russian territory. So you can literally see Russia sitting in Anchorage, which is quite interesting. And there is a small Russian Orthodox community in Alaska, certainly in Anchorage, where there are many Russian Orthodox churches as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether Donald Trump, as we know, is flying straight back, but whether Putin will spend any time maybe meeting with the Russian community in Alaska.
Yeah, I wonder how quickly Vladimir Putin will fly out again, given Donald Trump is flying out, we believe, around 2 in the morning our time, after this meeting at around 8 in the evening our time. Christopher Hope is here with some of the details of that.
Well, yes, I'm scanning through all of the different news sources. We don't think that Donald Trump has spoken. Often he can speak as he leaves the White House, as he gets into his helicopter, Marine One. We haven't seen that yet. All we know is he's tweeted the following on his he's posted on Truth Social platform: high stakes, and then 3 exclamation marks. I mean, the fact he's not saying anything, I think, is as significant, by the way, because normally he can't be shut up, Donald Trump, and is keen to try and shape the agenda and expectations with the world's press. He hasn't done that, apart from those 2 words, high stakes. That shows, well, it's a moment for him to take a breath. Michael Ellis.
I think it very much is, and really, he is, as we keep saying, he really is one of the most unpredictable people on the world circuit. And certainly diplomats are very nervous about this, and they're waiting with bated breath to see what the consequence of this meeting is going to be. That we're going to have to wait and find out, because, as you say, Chris, usually President Trump does speak to journalists on the lawn before he gets into Marine One. We just saw him, as Tom was saying, arrive in the Beast, as they call that vehicle of his, and now board Air Force One, and he's been most unusually quiescent up to this point, and maybe that means he has something in his back pocket.
I mean, this might seem a bit of a stupid question mark, but do you think he might be slightly nervous about this meeting? I mean, there's a lot riding on it, not just for Ukraine, obviously, but also for America, and also for his Peace Prize ambitions.
Yeah, well, yes. It's difficult ever to imagine Donald Trump being nervous about anything, but if he is prone to nervousness about anything, I would have thought this would be one of those things, because there are consequences. We do know that he does have further ambitions. And perhaps one of the further ambitions that he has is to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So this will be of some importance to him. He's shown an interest in doing so.
It's also legacy, isn't it, with him? I mean,
very much so.
He says high stakes because he knows this is his last big job in his life, let's face it, right? And this meeting is one of those big days of his time as president.
And of course, a lot is riding on this. He describes himself as the president of peace. He said that on day 1 he would end this war. We're now on day 200 and something, but he does very, very clearly want to end this war. Whether it will end in a way that is acceptable to Vladimir Putin, question. Whether it will end in a way that's acceptable to Ukraine, question. And if the deal that is reached, if there is a deal reached, is not acceptable to either one of those parties, will it actually be worth the paper it's written on?
It's very easy also for people to say that they're in favour of peace. That's a very easy thing to say. Who isn't in favour of peace? But as history teaches us, peace not at any cost, because actually if you... those who were appeasers of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, they very much thought that they didn't want a repetition of World War I, but actually the consequence of that appeasement was, many would argue, World War II, and the millions of lives lost there. And the consequence of an enforced peace as far as Ukraine is concerned now might be sending a very wrong message to the former KGB agent Vladimir Putin about how he can get away with things.
Well, Michael Ellis, Christopher Hope, do stay with us. We should say this is Good Afternoon Britain. It's just after 1 o'clock on Friday the 15th of August. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Dawn Neeson.
I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out, whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future. Okay?
As we have just been discussing, is their first face-to-face in 6 years and the first US-Russia summit on American soil in over a decade. President Trump and Vladimir Putin prepared to hold crunch talks in Alaska. But will it end with a framework for peace in Ukraine or just more deadlock?
Well, President Trump is scheduled to leave the Washington Air Force Base, well, Joint Base Andrews, really, which is in Maryland. And he is on board Air Force One, as we can see there. Let's follow his plane as it taxis there. We're looking for this takeoff in what will be one of the most consequential moments of his presidency so far, ahead of a 7-hour, perhaps 7.5-hour flight to Anchorage, Alaska, on the other side of that great continental landmass of the United States, where he will look in the eye of Vladimir Putin and try to work through a deal. In the room, just Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and 2 translators.
And all we've heard from him, Tom, of course, is 2 words: high stakes. I think it does. We are, the world is watching this. There's watching this plane taking off from Joint Air Force Base and Andrews. He flies to Alaska. We know, of course, that Sergei Lavrov's there wearing a T-shirt with the letters the USSR in the Russian alphabet on his shirt. That is a message being sent out. We know yesterday Volodymyr Zelensky gave a 3-second hug to the very untactile Keir Starmer outside Downing Street. It's all about symbolism and high stakes, and here we are.
And it is dawn in America on the East Coast. Really atmospheric images we're seeing here of the sunrise in the background, the sunshine cascading across the tarmac there as the plane inches towards its takeoff position. I mean, if I didn't know that this was real life, I'd think this was a film.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded, actually, Tom, of Chris mentioned about the interpreters being the only people in the room. I'm reminded of an anecdote, I think, that comes back to the Margaret Thatcher era, where she insisted that the right interpreter, as she saw it, her interpreter, was present. Because when you're dealing, and she was dealing with Gorbachev at that time, when you're dealing with someone and you want the interpreter to have the same nerve that you've got, to use the same language, not to soften the language, not to make it a little bit more polite. You want the interpreter to be absolutely on message.
I've got a list here of who's on board that flight. That's quite telling.
Okay.
Marco Rubio, of course, the US Secretary of State, Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, but also Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. I think there's a deal to be done on the economy to sort out Russia, and that might be the way we get some deal on Ukraine. Also on there, John Ratcliffe, CII Director, Susie Wiles, of course, the very respected Chief of Staff Donald Trump, James Blair, her Deputy Bo Harrison, the other Deputy Chief of Staff, and also Nick Luna and Dan Scavino, and Steve Chung, of course, spokesman for Mr. Trump, and others too. Caroline Leavitt, we know her very well from GBNews. So look at who's there. There's a security story, but also one on the economy.
It's the commercial one, isn't it? I mean, Alaska's natural resources are very important to Moscow. American sanctions potentially being lifted, which is very beneficial to both Russia and to America as well. They will be supplying parts for the Russian Air Force, which is in grave need of them now. It does sound like that. We also Donald Trump is a businessman. First and foremost, that's where he does deals.
You're right, Dawn, and he's not the first American president who knows how to get a good deal. It's ironic, as we've mentioned, about this meeting being in Alaska, because, as you've pointed out, the Americans bought Alaska for a song about 150 years ago. The equivalent now, I'm told, with inflation, of only about $150 million. So pittance, really, for a state like the size of Alaska with its resources. They got a fantastic deal from the Russians at that time, and you can't help but make a juxtaposition with the deal they got then with the Chagos deal, dare I say it. But I mean, the reality of the matter is, will Trump use this opportunity to talk about trade, or will he use it to talk solely about European security?
And you can just see live footage there of Air Force One taking off on its way to Alaska, which, Tom, was about a 7-hour flight, did you say?
7.5.
Yeah, 7.5-hour flight. Some very, very big names on that flight. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I wonder what reception they're going to get when they land in Alaska. Will there be a reception for them? Will they? I mean, how are the people in Alaska feeling about this?
Well, I think Putin has to fly quite a distance as well from Moscow. I'm told it's 11. I think it's 11 time zones, Tom.
Wow.
So it's quite a long flight for him as well. And I don't think they'll be seeing many people, frankly, on the residents of Anchorage. They'll be landing, I suspect, at the US Air Force Base there, and it'll be sealed off completely for miles around. This is a very heavy security operation to have organised at very short notice.
Christopher, do you know exactly where this meeting is taking place in Anchorage?
Yes, it's taking place, interestingly, on a US Air Force base.
Right, it is on the base, right,
yeah,
okay.
So this, what the kind of irony of this is, this base is set up there in Anchorage, in Alaska, not to spy on Russia, but certainly to keep account of what Russia's up to. And now Vladimir Putin's flying in there. That's why I think it is fascinating.
But it is an absolutely enormous Air Force base. Yes. Anchorage is a global supply hub. The number of runways, airports, both civil and military. I mean, the place is swarming with aeroplanes. If you ever look at one of these maps that shows where all the aeroplanes are in the world at one time, you will just see this massive convergence in several spots. And Anchorage is one of those spots that deals with so much Pacific trade from the east to the west.
It was interesting. I was listening to an Alaskan, an Anchorage resident, being interviewed, Aaron, the other day about the fact that you've got the two of the most powerful men in the world at the moment actually in your town. It happens all the time. Most of them just stop and refuel and go. It's like they're used to world leaders just dropping off, maybe getting a few sort of like knickknacks and refueling and then taking off again.
They're used to seeing enormous aeroplanes as well. You can never know if is that sort of half of Amazon's inventory, or is that a president of a sort of middling country? Who knows?
We've got some new language out now from Sergei Lavrov, who's the Russian foreign minister. He's obviously there wearing his USSR jumper. He has told Russian state TV, "We know that we have our argument and our position is clear and unambiguous. We will present it." So as things stand, the two sides are not coming together anywhere close.
So how do we interpret that unambiguous? We have invaded Ukraine. We want the bits that we have, we're keeping them. Does that mean
I'm not sure they even accept they've invaded Ukraine? They call it a special military operation.
But the rest of the world does think they've invaded Ukraine. So do we interpret this as to mean, right, we're going to keep this bit but leave the rest of Ukraine as it is? Or we want Zelensky to go and install a puppet government, for want of a better phrase?
That is where Russia is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Putin himself, he's in Magadan, Far East Russia at the moment. He's meeting a local governor there and visiting an industrial facility before leaving for Anchorage. So it may be that Donald Trump arrives shortly before Putin.
Okay. One of the other options on the table I was reading, Michael, probably a question for you, is that Israel's occupation of the West Bank could be used as a model for ending the war. Russia would have military and economic control of occupied Ukraine under its own governing body, similar to how Israel's de facto rule of Palestinian territory. That doesn't sound like it's a great idea to me. What do you think?
Well, certainly that's going to be one replete with its own problems, if that's a suggestion. We just don't know. I mean, there are obviously examples from elsewhere around the world and historical examples that could be used to try and placate this problem. But the European position, certainly in the Ukrainian position, is a pretty emphatic one, that this was an outright piece of aggression by Russia against a European country, and it has to be dealt with accordingly. And the only way of sending the right message is a firm no.
Now, that is sort of the moral stance of many European countries. I wonder, does Donald Trump perhaps not take a moral position, but instead a business position.
Pragmatic.
How is this war ended? Sort of almost, I don't care who started it, how does it stop position? And that's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but ultimately it could lead to something that does stop the thousands of people being killed each and every week.
And I think that's what's driving it. I mean, Trump is 79. He's a grandfather. He talks about this meat grinder. He sees both sides of the ledger. He sees the Ukraine deaths, which we don't report much in this country, but I know from reporting, reports I know in Ukraine, that these cemeteries are getting bigger and bigger, and no one's talking about it. We know about the Russian losses. We're told about them by the UK and
but even bigger, because
allies.
the way in which Russia conducts war and always has conducted war, they just continually throw very undertrained individuals and just continue to throw these people out, often from poor parts of the country that people don't miss.
He calls it a meat grinder for that reason. He's looking at the deaths on both sides, thinking, this has got to stop and I can do it. And that's where he comes from, I think.
What happens if it doesn't stop, Michael? Could this carry on? I mean, it's an eternal stalemate?
Well, that's the dynamic, Dawn, that Trump and his crowd will be concerned about. And that's what they will be trying to argue is the reason to try and break the mould. There's been this stagnation for years now. Sanctions aren't working in the sense that if they are working to damage the Russian economy, they're not working to stop the conflict and the loss of life. And this meat grinder approach to human life that the Russians have always historically used, and one of the reasons, actually, it's VJ Day today, one of the reasons that Japan surrendered, one of them, was because Russia declared war on the same day that Nagasaki was bombed. And people knew, even in those days, that Russia entering a conflict was one that was going to have serious consequences because of the value or lack of value they place on human life. But doing a deal with Putin is extremely hazardous because he's a former KGB agent, as we've said. He's been shown in the past not to be trustworthy. He's said things that haven't come to fruition. And there will be a consequence to this of quite serious proportions depending on what happens.
And isn't this the moral hazard of any agreement that is born out of people just sort of giving up along a front line that appears to have been frozen, a bit First World War-like, really, with the trenches that have been stuck in the same position for now more than a year? Is there a risk here that if one side doesn't win militarily, that actually this conflict pauses for a bit and that the peace isn't sustainable? Ultimately, we're talking on VJ Day, as you rightly say. Part of the reason for dropping those bombs was complete victory was necessary in order to bring that war to an end.
It's very easy, you're right, Tom, and it's very easy for people to say, and understandable for people to say, those bombs shouldn't have been dropped. A couple of 100,000 people died in those bombs. But what is the alternative? The alternative could have been up to 1 million Allied lives lost. Those are the estimates. We'll never know because that didn't happen. But hundreds of thousands of Allied lives would have been lost. And so the consequence of not doing a deal is the loss of more lives now.
And the other issue, I suppose, is that Russia having declared war on Japan, had it gone on further, Russia expanding its empire ever further into the Pacific as well, something that the Allies didn't want. Of course, we don't often talk about how the fact that whilst all of the European countries decolonised after the war, Russia actually expanded its land colonies right up into the Berlin Wall.
I just want to read this one quote from a local resident in Alaska saying, well, we're torn here. We don't, it's quite excitement, but also very wary of what's going to happen. All we're saying is, please don't sell us back.
Oh, gosh. Oh, a good point. Well, let's pause this conversation now. Of course, we'll be bringing you more on the Trump-Putin crunch talks throughout the programme.
Let's return to that breaking news from earlier. That suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder after he called for far-right protesters' throats to be cut at an anti-racism rally in the wake of rioting following the Southport murders.
Now, this is an extraordinary verdict. Some will say that it represents something slightly strange about our status with free speech, given the arrests and convictions of what people said if they were perceived to be on the right and protesting at that time, as opposed to on the left.
Let's also talk about Lucy Connolly. He's still serving time. OK, let's go to GB News Home and Security editor Mark White to bring us up to date on this, frankly, quite astonishing story. Mark, what's going on?
Well, this is a decision of a jury, isn't it? At the end of the day, they've weighed up the evidence before them and they've come to that conclusion that they believe that Ricky Jones has Labour councillor in Dartford, was not guilty of inciting violence at this protest on the 7th of August last year in Walthamstow in East London, where he made and was caught on video making that gesture of slitting your throat, with the allegation that he was saying that he wanted to slit the throat of far-right protesters. Now, in his evidence to Snaresbrook Crown Court, he said it was completely out of character, and what he was doing was not talking about individuals or indeed really suggesting that anybody should have their throat cut, but he was just angry. He was caught up, he said, in the moment. He was responding, he claims, to an earlier reported incident of a National Front sticker, which was, according to him, discovered on a train, and peeled off behind that sticker was a razor blade, which he said infuriated him. So, as I say, he says it was completely out of character with him. He called character witnesses who attested to that fact as well, and taking it in the round with all the evidence before them, including the aggravating factors of what he did and was caught on camera doing, and the mitigation that he put forward, the jury has decided that he was not guilty. It's perfectly legitimate for you guys and everyone else to question the decision reached by the jury in the context of how it sits next to other high-profile incidents of late where people have been jailed for similar, if not lesser, alleged offences.
I understand the jurors deliberated for just over half an hour. It didn't take them long to make this decision either.
Clearly they were convinced by it, Don.
Well, I suppose this is one of the big and interesting counterfactuals of the riots last summer. Had the people arrested by the police and, in the main, given state-funded lawyers, given advice effectively from the state to plead guilty, had they said no, had they demanded a trial and a jury of their peers assess what they said, well, perhaps they could have ended up more like Ricky Jones than Lucy Connolly. Lucy Connolly, of course, wrote a tweet that said, "Burn the hotels for all I care."
For all I care,
For all I care. That sounds like an expression of frustration rather than a command to burn the hotels. And yet, a slit-the-throat suggestion. But perhaps, actually, had Lucy Connolly demanded a trial and a jury of her peers assess that, she wouldn't have been in prison after all.
I think you make an excellent point. And I think there is a very high probability that had she gone before a jury of her peers, had they been able to get into her mindset at that time, had they all of the background of this woman who had never been in trouble with the authorities before, and all of the tragedy that she had in her life as well, and how all of that manifested itself in an ill-judged tweet that she acknowledged herself should never have gone out and was quickly deleted, then it may well be that a jury of her peers would have decided that she was not guilty as well. But you're right, many people took the advice of their lawyers, and their lawyers will often say, look, you know, it's a relatively minor charge in the scheme of things. Plead not guilty, you get a third of your sentence as such. But remember, we were in a time period where the courts were clamping down very heavily on those involved in the unrest or potentially stoking unrest, because they were in a period of trying to ensure that the violence that was spreading right across the country was disincentivized by significant, hefty sentences handed down. So, yeah, she, I think, was badly advised.
James Cleverly, the former Home Secretary, has said that the jury's decision is perverse, and he's written, which a lot of people are agreeing with at the moment, this is This is unacceptable. Perverse decisions like this are adding to the anger that people feel and amplifying the belief there is a dispassionate criminal justice system, i.e. to cheer justice. Oh, sorry, we have to go. Thank you, Mark. We understand we have live pictures of the King now at the Arboretum, is he still? The National Memorial Arboretum, yes.
Well, of course, all day today there have been there's been a memorial service and indeed memorial events marking 80 years since victory over Japan, VJ Day, which of course brought to an end the Second World War.
Yeah.
The enormous conflict that, of course, took so many lives and that so many British servicemen, Commonwealth servicemen, Empire servicemen gave their lives to defend the freedom of not just people in Europe and the European theatre, but right around the world and the Asia-Pacific theatre too.
Yeah, and the King has spoken very movingly there with the Queen today about in times of war and in times of peace, the greatest weapon of war is not the arms you bear, but the arms you link. A very moving day for the King and Queen. Cameron Walker.
Yes, it certainly was, and the King listened to testimony from a number of veterans during this service wearing the Stonefield Marshal No. 4 uniform, and in fact, he actually got up to greet a number of the veterans who were bravely stood on that stage, reading extracts from their own diaries from back in the day, reading extracts from diaries of their fallen comrades, and it was clearly moving, I think, for both the King and Queen to be there today. And in fact, we are going to try and get this clip for you a little later on, so do continue to stay tuned in for GB News. But a 105-year-old army veteran named Yavar Abbas went off script completely unexpectedly and started praising the King for being there despite his cancer diagnosis, and said his grandfather would be proud. The Queen visibly in tears. It was quite a moment. We are trying to get that to you as quickly as possible.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. Of course, this is one of those moments that is so special because all of these veterans, they're around 100 years old.
Yeah.
We are not going to have necessarily another big moment to mark their service and to thank them for what they did. Having those veterans there in person is such a special and unique thing now.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Tom, because this is the 80th anniversary. The youngest veteran, I repeat, the youngest veteran there is 96 years old. The oldest is 105. 33 of them there in total. Yes, there are certainly more veterans who are not at the National Memorial Arboretum today who simply couldn't make it, including Jim Wren, who obviously we met here on GB News a couple of days ago, who spent time with the Duchess of Edinburgh at his care home earlier on this week. But I think this is going to be perhaps the last major national memorial for VJ Day where there are a significant number of veterans present. With the King as head of the armed forces, whose grandfather was the King during the Second World War, delivering the message to the nation saying the war is over. And of course, King Charles this morning delivering his own message of commemoration, echoing the words of his grandfather, King George VI, praising the leadership of his great-uncle, Lord Mountbatten, who, of course, was the most senior commander in the Far East in the latter stages of the war, and also talking about the forgotten army. You know, these veterans have said that those on the home front perhaps forgot about the struggles in those last few months of the war when Nazi Germany had been defeated, and yet thousands of them were still being killed and fighting each day for freedom in the Far East. And that is what today is all about. It was an incredibly moving service.
Well, 71,000 British and Commonwealth troops died facing fanatical Japanese fighters in Burma, Malaya and the South Pacific. And as we know, it was horrific, absolutely horrific. And 12,000 prisoners of war perished in, as we said, atrocious conditions, starved, bayoneted and abused in the prison camps. I mean, a horrific war, and yet it is the forgotten war. In so many ways, isn't it, Michael Ellis? I mean, the horrors of it stay with us, but we concentrate on VE Day so much.
We do, and that's why the work of the King and Queen, and in fact, the King's mother and, of course, his grandfather have been so important in recognising the service, duty, loyalty and dedication of those who fell in World War II, including, particularly today, those who fell in the Far East. And this location, by the way, is such a special location, the National Memorial Arboretum, only officially opened in 2001. It's 150 acres. There are 25,000 trees there and some 400 memorials. And I think what's been happening over much of the last hour is that the King has been shown around some of the memorials in particular that relate to Far East service. So there's the Burma Railway Memorial, which is actually made of 30 metres of original rail that British slave labourers had to build between what was then Burma and what was then Siam, now Thailand, of course, between Myanmar and Thailand, and where thousands perished. In fact, the rate of attrition was something in the region of 27% of people died in those jungle conditions of malnutrition and of disease. And the King will be visiting, or will have visited in the last hour, a number of those memorials.
In those Japanese forced labour camps.
Yes.
I believe you've got the clip you're talking about?
Yes, we do. So this is the veteran, Yava Abbas, going off script in front of the King. Take a look.
But before I read the excerpt, I make due apology for briefly going off the script to salute my brave King, who is here with his beloved Queen, in spite of the fact that he's under treatment for cancer, and anything that I share with him. And if it provides any comfort of which I've been rid for the past 25 years and counting. And I salute him for gracing this occasion, because by his presence here, he has gone a long way to make sure that his granddad's 14th Army is never given the sobriquet again of a forgotten army.
An incredibly moving moment there, so powerful. Of course, Yava Abbas praising the King for being there despite his cancer diagnosis. The Queen visibly in tears, visibly emotional. I don't know if it's because of what Yava Abbas was saying or whether she was just visibly moved by the rest of the service. But I think it was such a lovely moment. This 105-year-old veteran saluting his current king, remembering the former king, George VI, and directly telling King Charles, your grandfather would be proud of you. So it must have been an incredibly special moment, particularly because the king does continue a weekly cycle of cancer treatment, and yet he was determined to cut his holiday short, come down from Scotland, come to England and pay tribute to all these veterans.
Now, that is service. That is such a moving example of how unifying King Charles can be, and the monarchy as an institution for all those who served and all those who are free because of those who served. I wonder, though, how much more personal this is to King Charles, because as he was speaking earlier about Lord Mountbatten, who was leading the British troops out there in the Asia-Pacific, and was in many ways a sort of father figure to King Charles throughout his childhood.
Yeah, he absolutely was. In the early stages of King Charles's life, Queen Elizabeth II and, well, the Princess Elizabeth, then Queen Elizabeth II, and the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, were away quite a lot on official duties. So he spent much more time with his grandparents, King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. But also Lord Mountbatten was this kind of father figure to him in the absence of his own father. And that's no criticism of Prince Philip. That's just how things were, of course, back then. But I think they did write letters to each other throughout Lord Mountbatten's life, and as King Charles said in his speech this morning, I praise the leadership of my great-uncle Lord Mountbatten, from whom I learned so much about the particular horrors and heroism witnessed in those furthest fields of combat. And the King accompanied his great-uncle Lord Mountbatten to the Royal Albert Hall for the one of the reunions, let's say, of those who fought in the Far East, the Burma Star Memorial Fund put on this special occasion, and he reminisced back to the 1960s or early 70s, where he was saying thousands of these veterans were there together. And of course, now we're down to 33 at the official ceremony, so quite a difference.
Makes a great point. I mean, the King also this morning made a point of talking about the close collaboration between nations across vast distances, faiths and cultural divides. And, you know, the 14th Army was referenced there. Yeah. And we have to remember that 340,000 Indian troops were involved in this
That's right, Dawn. And actually, the 105-year-old veteran referred to the 14th Army. Do you know there were 40 languages spoken during the World War II in that army alone? It was quite a thing to organise.
Well, let's cross over now to Jack Carson, who is at the National Memorial Arboretum, and Doogie Beattie, who is in Lisbon for us as well. Jack, let's start with you. We've just been looking at pictures of the King walking around. A moving service today.
Really moving, not only with the silence, but with poems and words read out by veterans. You heard not long ago, of course, you know, some of that service, and really poignant. I think you saw the emotion on the faces of their majesties, but also on the spectators, on the crowds that had gathered here, the veterans that had gathered here. A really moving service for so many of those veterans, because for years they have felt like they have been forgotten soldiers, part of the forgotten army, because once victory in Europe had been celebrated, they were still fighting over in the Far East and the Pacific. And it's been a privilege to be able to speak to some of those veterans today. Sid Machin spoke to us earlier on. Take a listen to what he told us.
Conditions like, because you were mentioning you did all your training, but I guess that training couldn't you know, prepare you for the conditions and for the climate.
We only did, they took us on long marches to get us used to walking, because once we were in there, that's all you could do.
So what was the climate like out there when you first got out there and felt the climate and felt what you were having to fight in and deal with? What was that like?
I've been in India for quite a while, and I got used to the heat to a degree, but it was very hot. Yeah.
Just fascinating, such a privilege to be able to speak to those veterans and find out what it was like, because so many of them having to be involved. First time ever. They were trained in England and parts of India, so some of them used to that climate already, but nothing really able to prepare them for the kinds of warfare and battles that they were going into. And of course, in part of the service, we saw Ronald Gumbrey read out and recite a part of the exhortation, that famous poem written in the First World War. Take a listen.
I shall go not old, as we that are left grow old. I shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Those words there never failing to make a crowd emotional when they are read out, such a poignant way to commemorate, of course, all of those who never came back from the Far East and the Pacific, but also today as part of the commemorative service to remember those who, of course, fought for victory in Japan 80 years ago.
Absolutely. Jack, thank you. Let's go straight to Doogie Beattie in Lisbon now.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Lisbon. Lisbon, of course, is a garrison city. The barracks here named Thiethel Barracks after the Battle of Thiethel in the First World War. It is extremely linked with the military in every single way, and as I said earlier on, there was commemorations, minutes of silence here, laying of wreaths, but really what got to me here was Major Frank Partridge, who was captured by the Japanese. He invented the defibrillator after he came home, after witnessing the amount of men that suffered heart attacks and cardiac arrest through extreme conditions. And joining me is one of his friends, Alderman Jim Dillon. Jim, you're 91 years of age. You knew the man extremely well. He was captured in Singapore. Talk us through what happened to him after Singapore.
Yes, I knew Frank Partridge very, very well for 45, 50 years. He was captured in Singapore and he was made to walk 200 miles in bare feet to the border with Burma, and to nearly where the bridge of the River Kwai was built. And there he had to work in atrocious conditions, and he was in a concentration camp. When he went into it, he was 11.5 stone weight, and when he came out of it, he was barely 6.
And he watched men suffer from heart attacks with the strain. How did he decide that an electric shock would actually bring them back to life?
Well, he didn't really decide then that an electric shock would bring them back to life, but whenever he came back and became head of the cardiology unit in the Royal Victoria Hospital, Belfast, then there was what you called a standard defibrillator, and he thought you had got to attend the patient within 5 to 10 minutes. That's important, that 5 to 10 minutes to get it on. And he decided it had got to go to the patient rather than the patient come to it, so he perfected the portable defibrillator. And this saved millions and millions of lives throughout the world. Not only is he a great man, but he is an exceptionally good man.
Well, there you go. Some goodness that comes out of exactly what happened in wars. And of course, penicillin, etc., was brought about after the Second World War. But today, they have remembered all of those that fell during the Second World War, and particularly in that campaign.
Ziggy Beattie, thank you very much. Amazing testimonies there. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show. Is Britain letting paedophiles run free? Despite 178,000 tips to authorities, the Home Office recorded just 39,000 offences for child abuse imagery. We'll speak to one of the ferocious campaigners about predators who says that the Online Safety Act is doing more harm than good.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday, today dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, and increasingly some low cloud starting to lap onto the eastern coast of England as the day progresses. Hot sunshine elsewhere. And although the cooler breeze across parts of northern and eastern UK will bring about average temperatures, high teens, low 20s, we'll still see much higher than average temperatures, high 20s and possible 31 Celsius across southern parts of the UK. Meanwhile, there will still be 1 or 2 showers developing across parts of eastern Scotland, but nowhere near on the scale of Thursday's downpours. And most places will be dry, albeit rather cloudy, especially for eastern and central Scotland. Some sunshine for the Western Isles as well as for Northern Ireland, but plenty of sunshine there for much of England and Wales, although some coastal parts of the North Sea there seeing some cloud. That cloud will tend to creep back in after dark. In fact, it will become fairly extensive across the eastern half of the UK, certainly, perhaps reaching as far as the West Midlands or even East Wales overnight. And under that cloud, temperatures will stay at 16 or 17 Celsius. Even with the clear spells elsewhere, it's still going to be a warm night and a pleasant start to the weekend for many of us, although a lot of cloud will persist during the morning, especially for much of eastern Scotland, into eastern England as well. It will lift and break, but I think some places will keep the cloud into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere, still hot in the southwest, cooler elsewhere.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A725 northbound slip at Belsea Hill roundabout is closed for roadworks, with a detour in place. Expect M4 westbound diversions from junction 45 to 46. M62 westbound in Kirklees is congested between junctions 25 and 22. M6 southbound in Cheshire East faces 30-minute delays between junctions 17 and 16. There's a 10-minute delay on the M25 anti-clockwise in Kent between junction 3 and 2. And on the trains, disruptions affect Chiltern Railways between Leamington Spa and Banbury. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1:41, coming up to 1:42. Now, the Online Safety Act, aimed at enhancing child protection online, has sparked outrage due to its age verification requirements, creating challenges for everyday activities like streaming music or accessing with Wikipedia. But the real issue is that the law doesn't tackle the biggest problem. Too few child predators are being investigated or prosecuted.
Yes, despite tech companies reporting abuse material, many cases go unnoticed by the authorities. So has the confusion of the Online Safety Act actually made things worse? Well, joining us now is the Special Advisor to Stop Child Predators, Maureen Flatley. Maureen, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. I know you were one of the principal architects behind something called Marsh's Law in the United States that really clamped down on child predators. But you have huge concerns over what the United Kingdom is doing with the Online Safety Act.
That would be putting a nice face on it. My concerns are quite intense. It appears that the UK is making the same mistakes and perhaps bigger mistakes than have been made in the US. When bills like this are passed that don't include any focus on law enforcement, that don't include any focus on arresting, convicting, and jailing predators, you can be assured that one thing will happen. Children will not be safer, and it will continue to unleash what is already a digital crime wave.
So how have we managed to get a piece of legislation that doesn't sound like, in your view, it's fit for purpose?
Yeah, it's mystifying, actually. I have been watching this trend over here in the US for quite some time. I think that it's a combination of a generally negative attitude about tech companies. I think that for many people, it appears to be an easy, inexpensive way to appear to attack a problem. So in other words, they don't have to spend money on law enforcement. They don't have to spend money on more sophisticated organized surveillance. And at the end of the day, they check the box, and then they can say, in a move that can only be described as virtue signaling, not any kind of meaningful effort to protect children, and they move on.
That is absolutely fascinating, because you will speak to so many politicians here who think they've done something amazing, that they've protected lots of children by restricting internet access to everyone online in the United Kingdom. But I suppose one of the big things is the predators are going to access the internet anyway. They're going to use VPNs or get around all of the blocks. We know many children are getting around the blocks anyway. To some extent, has the United Kingdom done what France did in the Second World War, erect a Maginot Line saying that this is going to be a brilliant defence, put all their money and attention in that. Meanwhile, Hitler just goes through Belgium.
That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. They've created the impression that they've done something important and powerful, but I can assure you that predators all over the world, and this, by the way, is a global crime problem, they're applauding this. These laws effectively make child exploitation legal by skipping over the criminal justice piece of this problem and going straight to all this, we call it jazz hands over here. So a lot of arm waving, a lot of self-promotion. Mr. Kyle says, and this is the biggest lie, Mr. Kyle says, if you want to overturn the Online Safety Act, you're on the side of the predators. What a laugh. Because in fact, this law is a gift to predators.
So Maureen, Maureen, is there a foolproof way to stop predators targeting children online?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of issues here that we really don't talk about enough. The UK has a law, the US has a law that actually puts a lot of responsibility on parents for keeping their children safe until they're at least 18 years old. I think it's called the Child Act in the UK. And so it's somewhat concerning to me that, not to vilify parents, but to never really talk in any meaningful way about what parents can do to protect their children. And in the US, if a parent allows a child to become addicted to something or exposes a child to harm in any way, and especially if the child dies, that parent is in trouble. And in fact, this piece of legislation completely enhances that dynamic. So we're not really educating parents adequately.
I suppose the government might argue there will be some parents who are incapable of taking on that advice. There will be some bad parents. What do you do about those edge cases?
Well, I mean, if they're incapable of taking care of their children, they should probably lose custody of their kids anyway, you know, not to be flippant. But at the end of the day, the government, over here at least, has done a terrible job of monitoring that population.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know, I look at it this way. My father was an FBI agent in the U.S. in the 1950s and 60s, and he was instrumental in identifying and attacking the organized crime issues that we faced here at that time. We really need to be doing something like that. We need to be putting a global strike force together where there's cooperation among the various countries. 94% of cyber tips from the NCMEC go to foreign governments. We have no control over that.
It's a really huge issue. Maureen Flatley, thanks so much for speaking to us of Stop Child Predators. Really interesting perspective there. Let's catch up on the travel weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Temperatures easing a little bit in Spain and Portugal, but it's still going to be pretty hot for the next few days. Pretty humid in Italy with the threat of a few scattered heavy thundery showers. Dry and sunny in Spain and Portugal. As I said, though, temperatures just dropping a little bit here over the next few days. Could be quite breezy for Sicily and parts of northern Tunisia. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Greek islands as well, but plenty of sunshine likely here. Continued risk of a few showers for Italy and Croatia.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
You seen the president yet?
Morning, guys. No, not yet. We're just in the press room behind the scenes. I've got my Trump Turnberry coffee cup, though, just to prove to you that I really am here. We're waiting here basically until we get the nod to run out, hopefully to see Donald Trump and Keir Starmer together. These occasions, I'm realising, are a little bit sort of hurry up and wait. We think that the Prime Minister and the President might be meeting outdoors today. Yesterday, you might have seen Trump with Ursula von der Leyen in the amazing ballroom, in the grand ballroom here at Turnberry. Well, the weather is surprisingly nice for Scotland. The sun is out, it isn't raining. So there's a chance that we will get to talk to these two world leaders, but we won't be in the ballroom. We'll be outside, I think, on the golf course. We're just waiting to hear.
And what's the atmosphere like, Bev? Is there a lot of excitement?
I think amongst the press, they're all fairly used to this sort of thing. I mean, I still feel a little bit like a competition winner because I came on Air Force One, and I'm still really excited about the whole ordeal. But I think a lot of people here have done this sort of thing before. You know, we've had an influx this morning of the British press. So I'm with the international corps who came over on Air Force One. There are about 13 of us. But the British press are here as well today. They're all obviously keen to get their own questions into Starmer. It will be that setting where, you know, we just all go for it if we can and throw a question out in that direction. I got lucky on Friday when we were on the runway at Prestwick Airport, Glasgow Prestwick Airport, when we landed on Air Force One, and I asked him about immigration, and of course he gave us that line about the fact that Europe has to get its act together.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Wake up with a familiar face. She's back on breakfast television. Penny Smith returns.
Miss me? Well, I'm here, and I brought the coffee.
And we're reuniting to brighten your morning.
It's just like old times.
Only better.
So join Penny and me next Monday and Tuesday only on GB News Breakfast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 2. And Dawn, I think we might need to change clothes for this particular item.
Live on air, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're asking.
It's what you've all been waiting for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hang on,
really, no one needs to see that at my age.
Right.
Okay.
This is going to be very necessary for what we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
OK, here we go. Right. Dawn, do you have something there?
This isn't quite as dangerous,
Marvellous.
but it just makes me look more of an idiot, to be honest with you, and
I
that
think
takes
you
some
look
doing.
tremendous.
Thank you very much. It suits me.
That is
okay.
great.
So the reason we are making ourselves look even more like we normally do, like idiots, Birmingham City Council is removing Union flags and English flags from city streets, despite flags being installed by residents in a patriotic outpouring.
Well, the council says that the flags pose a safety risk to pedestrians and motorists and could put lives at risk, despite being 25 feet off the ground. Amazingly, the council's statement said this: lampposts are engineered for their specific purpose, and adding extra weight or stress from flags could cause them to weaken over time and potentially collapse.
I'm sorry, are you feeling the strain from that flag, Tom?
Do you know what?
This
is polyester,
is it
right?
putting your back out,
This is not putting my back out. I think I can stand up, and
you're coping quite well.
I don't think this is any extra weight.
No, and you're not a lamppost either.
And if anything, a lamppost is stronger than me.
It's slightly stronger than you. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest here. This is a political council telling locals who want to be proud about their country, who want to wave their flags and be silly but also patriotic, that they're not allowed to do so. I mean, this is political, is it not?
I mean, I wonder, she asks innocently, whether they'd have any problem with Palestinian flags, which are obviously a lot lighter and won't damage.
Oh yeah.
Won't damage lampposts quite as much. OK.
Well, should we see what the council said? A council spokesman said people who attach unauthorised items to lampposts could be putting their lives and those of motorists and pedestrians at risk. We are continuing to do this every week, and we'd ask that staff doing this work are allowed to continue this work unhindered. They say they're fixing the lampposts. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. A patriotic programme, of course. Birmingham Council won't be coming anywhere near us, but we'll be back with you after the very latest weather forecast.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday. Today, dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, and increasingly some low cloud starting to lap onto the eastern coast of England as the day progresses. Hot sunshine elsewhere, and although the cooler breeze across parts of northern and eastern UK will bring about average temperatures, high teens, low 20s. We'll still see much higher than average temperatures, high 20s and possible 31 Celsius across southern parts of the UK. Meanwhile, there will still be one or two showers developing across parts of eastern Scotland, but nowhere near on the scale of Thursday's downpours. And most places will be dry, albeit rather cloudy, especially for eastern and central Scotland. Some sunshine for the Western Isles as well as for Northern Ireland, but plenty of sunshine there for much of England and Wales, although some coastal parts of the North Sea there seeing some cloud. And that cloud will tend to creep back in after dark. In fact, it will become fairly extensive across the eastern half of the UK, certainly, perhaps reaching as far as the West Midlands or even East Wales overnight. And under that cloud, temperatures will stay at 16 or 17 Celsius. Even with the clear spells elsewhere, it's still going to be a warm night and a pleasant start to the weekend for many of us, although a lot of cloud will persist during the morning, especially for much of eastern Scotland, into eastern England as well. It will lift and break, but I think some places will keep the cloud into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere. Still hot in the southwest, cooler elsewhere.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks to see how you can win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 15th of August. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Dawn Neeson.
I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future. Okay?
Okay, it's their first face-to-face in 6 years and the first US-Russia summit on American soil in over a decade. President Trump and Vladimir Putin prepare to hold crunch talks in Alaska. But will it end with a framework for peace in Ukraine or just more deadlock?
2 words, high stakes. That's all Donald Trump has said about what will happen today in Alaska. He's on the way there now. Air Force One, and so is Vladimir Putin. Stay tuned, the world is holding its breath.
And back in Blighty, the suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder after he called for far-right protesters' throats to be cut at an anti-racism rally.
For the millions of families
gathered around their wireless sets, and for their loved ones still serving far from home. It was the message a battle-weary world had long prayed for.
As Britain commemorates 80 years since Japan's surrender, marking the end of the Second World War, the King pays tribute to the courage, sacrifice and suffering of those who served, vowing never to forget.
Here at the National Memorial Arboretum, the Royal British Legion's commemorations led the country in a 2-minute silence at 12 o'clock, attended by their Majesties, and more than 30 veterans who served in the Far East and the Pacific will reflect on that service in this hour.
I'm in the garrison city of Lisburn in County Antrim, where a morning of reflection, commemoration and celebration has now come to an end. It ended with prayers for those that have given the ultimate sacrifice.
That Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And that reform includes the electoral system, that reform includes the abomination that is the House of Lords.
Yes, he once said he'd scrap it, but now Nigel Farage wants in. With 4 MPs, 10 councils and rising poll numbers, the Reform Party leader is demanding the right to send his own peers to the House of Lords. Now, just before we get to the news headlines, we are delighted to be joined by Christopher Hope, our political editor, because Donald Trump has spoken on board Air Force One.
The first time we heard from him, as I say, we know he has said high stakes with 3 exclamation marks on his social media feed. He's now told this to reporters, asked about the prospect of territorial swaps, that's giving away bits of Ukraine to Russia to go try and get a peace deal. He says they will be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. So the idea of making it over the heads of Ukraine won't happen. That's a relief for a lot of people. But he's not here to negotiate for Ukraine. He wants to get them to the table, he says. There are 2 sides. He says to Vladimir Putin, you want to take all of Ukraine. And if he wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine, according to Donald Trump. But he's not going to do it. So we've got that. And not going to do it implies a security guarantee. So some tentative good news from the flight so far.
Well, lots more to chew over, of course, over the next hour of this programme, but also all day on GB News. We're expecting later on this evening our time that extraordinary press conference between the 2 world leaders.
Yeah, and absolutely we want to know what you want to think about all the topics we're discussing today, from VJ Day to obviously what Trump and Putin are expected to sort out between them this afternoon. So gbnews.com/your say. But before we get stuck into the rest of the programme, let's get the news headlines.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. Our headlines. President Trump is on his way to Alaska to meet Vladimir Putin to discuss the war in Ukraine. The US president shared a message on social media ahead of boarding Air Force One. It said simply, high stakes. Donald Trump is in the air right now. He's flying the 7-hour journey to Alaska. However, he may arrive to demonstrations on the streets of Anchorage. Pro-Ukrainian protesters have been gathering there to rally against the summit. They're expressing disappointment that Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, will not be involved. However, Mr. Trump has described a potential second meeting, which may involve Ukraine's president, as more important.
We have a meeting with President Putin tomorrow. I think it's going to be a good meeting, but the more important meeting will be the second meeting that we're having. We're going to have a meeting with President Putin, President Zelensky, myself, and maybe we'll bring some of the European leaders along, maybe not. I don't know that it's going to be very important. We're going to see what happens. And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great.
Meanwhile, the Defence Secretary has dismissed calls from Nigel Farage to be allowed to nominate peers to the House of Lords. John Healey says Reform UK have been conspicuously absent over the war in Ukraine, and British politicians should be speaking with a united voice.
This is the moment, above all, when Putin is talking to Trump in Alaska, when the pressure must be on Putin to demonstrate that he is serious about peace, to scale back, not escalate, as he has been, the attacks on Ukraine. And we really require all political voices, including from Reform and Nigel Farage, to weigh in as strong as possible, condemning Putin, condemning the invasion in Ukraine, and we have not had that.
The King and Queen joined World War II veterans earlier for a memorial service on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day. Charles and Camilla, along with the Prime Minister, laid wreaths at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay their respects to those who served in the Far East and Pacific during the conflict. The King and Queen led a 2-minute silence before a rendition of the last post. Well, veterans of the conflict aged from 96 to 105 joined the royal family at the site as guests of honour. VJ Day is marked each year on the 15th of August, the date in 1945 when Japan surrendered to the Allied forces and World War II came to an end. Well, earlier the King paid tribute to those who fought and died during the war, saying they will never be forgotten. A suspended Labour councillor who called for protesters' throats to be cut at a rally has been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder. Ricky Jones faced trial at Snaresbrook Crown Court after he described demonstrators as disgusting Nazi fascists at an anti-racism protest in East London last August. It followed the Southport murders. Mr Jones, a borough councillor in Dartford in Kent since 2019, was warned by the Labour Party to stay away from the protest and was suspended a day after the incident. A woman's been remanded in custody after being charged with assaulting a security guard at a hotel housing migrants. The court heard how 22-year-old Shanae Augustus was part of a group of around 20 people who tried to barge into the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf on Wednesday. The incident took place after a resident of the hotel allegedly walked into her mother's flat. The court heard how Miss Augustus returned to the hotel with a meat cleaver after the confrontation. The migrant, who's in his early 20s, has also been arrested on suspicion of assault. All flights at Manchester Airport were halted this morning following a collision between two planes. Safety checks were carried out after two EasyJet aircraft clipped wings on the runway. A spokesperson for the airlines confirmed the incident took place and said an immediate investigation has been launched. Finally, the world's first humanoid robot games opened in Beijing a little earlier. The competition features athletic events like the 100-metre sprint and 5-against-5 football matches, while scenario simulation tasks include factory material handling. During the 3-day event, more than 500 robots from 16 countries will compete in over 400 events across 4 categories. It's enthralling watching, I think you'd agree. Performances, scenario simulation, competition and also side events. Those are your headlines. I'll be back with more at 2:30.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Quick run through how the markets look today. The pound will buy you $1.35 and €1.16. Gold will cost £2,465 and 24 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 trading at 9,185 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Now, Donald Trump has departed the White House ahead of the highly anticipated summit with Vladimir Putin.
Just got to say, Dawn, I like how on that background, I've got the American side and you have the Russian one. Right,
I hadn't even noticed that. I mean, considering we've just been draped in the English...
I just think it's a lot nicer that I've got the goodies and you've got the baddies.
If the cat fits. I'm going, well, we're considering how we've just been draped in England flags and England hats because...
Indisputably the goodies.
But killer flags from hell that you can't hang because they're too dangerous for lampposts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Donald Trump will go face-to-face with Vladimir Putin for the first time in 6 years this evening as the US president tries to hammer out a deal to end that war in Ukraine.
Yeah, ahead of the meeting, Trump said last night that the Russian president won't mess around with him. OK, well, joining us in the studio again, constitutional expert and former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, bring us what's happening. We know they're in the air now, but I think you've got more information about what Donald Trump is hoping to achieve.
Yeah, in many ways, on this Friday afternoon, everyone's holding their breath watching this plane fly to Anchorage in Alaska, and of course the Russian plane will also be on the way there with Vladimir Putin on board. Moments ago, on board Air Force One, the US President Donald Trump said that something will come of the talks, he said, but he won't negotiate, crucially, on behalf of Ukraine. He says that the issue of territorial swaps, mainly around the Donbass region, that will be discussed, but he's got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. The word proper is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Does that mean
isn't it?
They'll be forced to make a choice they don't want to make on issues like the Donbass. But he's not going to here to negotiate for Ukraine, he says. He wants to get them both to the table, Russia and Ukraine together. He says you've got two sides, and he says, of course, this talks are only happening because Donald Trump is the leader of America. So that's what's happened there. There's good news there, because the idea of doing a deal over the heads of Ukraine is anathema to the UK and Europe.
So, Michael, why not have Ukraine at this meeting in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question, but I would predict, and this is a bit risky because we all know how unpredictable Donald Trump is, I would predict it would be surprising if something positive doesn't come from this meeting, and that's because all the parties involved are very keen on the optics here. And they know how expensive it would be in terms of reputation to walk away from this meeting with nothing having come to fruition. I think we can also tell by the fact that, was it Steve Witkoff who went over there beforehand? And I think he was laying the ground. I suspect that they came to some sort of arrangement. He came back to President Trump and said, this is what will happen. And so they pretty much know what is likely to happen, I suspect.
Now, we all know how desperate Donald Trump is for an agreement. He wants to be the president of peace. The White House, in recent days, put out a graphic on social media listing all the international politicians who've nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. But are we under-discussing how much Vladimir Putin is actually under pressure here too? The Russian economy is running on fumes. There's only sort of a Russian economy at all because of war production. Ultimately, he needs an economic win.
And on that exact point, Tom, you're talking ahead of what's happening out there, because right now a snaps drop from Air Force One. The US President has said of his Russian counterpart, he notices he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia. That's good. I like that, because they want to do business. But they're not doing business with America, he says, until the war is settled. And that is where we are. It's an economic offering, I think, from the US to Russia, but the price is peace in Ukraine. And that is the shape of the next 12 hours. Fascinating.
I think some of this messaging that you're giving now, Chris, is going to be encouraging to Europe and
yes.
to the UK, because this will be the sort of messaging they'll want to have heard. The Russian economy is in the state it is in because of the sanctions which have been rightly put on them because of their invasion of Ukraine.
And that's why we see the cast list going over there. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah.
The Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary. There's an economic story in here which we've been slightly ignoring so far.
And yet there is now going to be a very, very difficult... Let's say there is a deal that is acceptable somehow to all sides that works through here, and Donald Trump lifts sanctions on Russia. I mean, would that be politically acceptable for European countries? Would Russia be welcomed back into the SWIFT banking system? Will we all start buying cheap Russian gas and oil? I can't see European countries signing up to that, even if the United States of America does.
All eyes on Ukraine. If Ukraine accepts what's on offer, that will change. I think that will change. But, I mean, of course, the Crimea, I doubt that's going back anywhere near Ukraine anytime soon. But if we do restore the borders to pre-February 2020... that could be a start towards that.
And yet, is there not a moral hazard here? Say Vladimir Putin gets this economic win. Sanctions are lifted. He takes a chunk out of Ukraine too. I mean, ultimately, that is a reward for a president who has launched an invasion of another sovereign country. What does China do then? Does China then decide, well, as long as I can take Taiwan quickly, I'll go in and take that, and then everything will go back to normal in a few years?
That's exactly rewarded for this behaviour.
You can't, and that is a reward for aggression, which history has shown us is not the approach to make if you really want peace in the longer term. And as for peace, what Mr. Trump seems to want is the Nobel Peace Prize above everything else. That's fine. Well, actually, when you look historically at some of the people who've had it over the years, perhaps wouldn't be that an unreasonable thing. But Chris,
there's more language here too. So Mr. Trump has now said that President Putin wants a piece of the economic offering, the financial incentives which America has got, because his country is not hot economically. That's, of course, Trump talking about Putin. In fact, it's the opposite. But again, he said just now that Putin will face very severe consequences if a deal isn't made to end the fighting in Ukraine, probably economic consequences.
Well, yeah, that's what... Because otherwise, what are the severe consequences? And they're thinking about... OK, thank you, gentlemen. Stay with us. Let's return to the breaking news from earlier. The suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder after he called for far-right protesters' throats to be cut at an anti-racism rally in the wake of rioting following the Southport murders. GB News Home and Security editor Mark White joins us. Mark, bring us up to speed on what's happening with this story.
Well, it was on trial, obviously, charged with inciting violence at this protest when he was caught on camera making that throat-slitting gesture and saying that these other protesters should have their throats cut. Now, he claimed when he was on trial that actually he wasn't talking about any individuals. He was just caught up in the anger of the situation, that it was completely out of character for him, that he was deeply angry by what he was seeing in terms of the violence up and down the country. And in particular, he spoke about one alleged incident of a sticker for the National Front that was discovered inside a train, and that peeled back, it revealed a razor blade inside that sticker. I don't know how true or not, whether that was some apocryphal tale, but he claims that on hearing that just added and fueled the anger that he had. He also called upon a number of character witnesses who all attested again to the fact that it was completely out of character for this councillor from Dartford, for this, as he was at the time, full-time union official. They had advised him, by the way, the Labour Party, not to go on this march on the 7th of August, precisely because of the potential for how it might look for a serving councillor to join such a protest, but he had decided to go anyway and to protest and to be caught up in the situation. At the end of the day, the jury, deliberating on all of the facts, all of the aggravating circumstances of what he did, the mitigating factors he put across, decided that he was not guilty. And you can agree or disagree with that. The fact that it has now been tried, it's been dispensed off as a court case. You're free to say whatever you like about whether you think that was a wrong-headed decision by the jury or not.
OK. Mark, thank you very much. That's Mark White there. Joining us now is Spiked editor Tom Slater. Tom, good to see you. Tom, what do you make of this?
Well, I think what we really see in this case is what a difference a jury makes. Obviously, in the wake of Southport, we saw many people being arrested for various different crimes, whether it was inciting racial hatred, whether it was menacing communications, what have you. And in many of those cases, they were kind of strong-armed or strongly encouraged to plead guilty and were given quite hefty sentences as a consequence, Lucy Connolly being the most prominent example, but there are others as well. It's worth saying that Ricky Jones was hauled up on different charges, encouraging violent disorder. As I understand it, it's actually a harder charge to prove. But I think what we've seen in this case is that, generally speaking, juries are quite unwilling to send people to prison to convict them for what are often comments made, as despicable as they might be, in the heat of the moment, in a particular context. And given how many speech crimes we have on the statute, but given how many prosecutions we've seen of late, I think that's a positive thing to take, regardless of how we feel about this particular individual.
And yet, isn't there some sort of, perhaps, two-tier element to what we're seeing here? Obviously, Ricky Jones had good legal advice. He wasn't held in custody awaiting this trial either. Now, that isn't necessarily the case with what happened to those who were on the political right at the time of the protests. Some of those people were held in custody until they either pled guilty or innocent, and some of those, well, couldn't afford their own legal advice and were given what now, in retrospect, looks like, frankly, terrible advice: to plead guilty to speech crimes.
No, absolutely. And it's worth saying that Ricky Jones, he was remanded in custody for a time before being bailed, but he was bailed. That didn't happen to Lucy Connolly, who was refused bail, presumably on the grounds that there was fear of reoffending there. It's also worth stressing that these are different offences again, so different, different judgments may have been made. But I think it really does speak to a certain lack of solid advice that was given to various people who were swept up in the post-Southport moment. And it's not just cases like Lucy Connolly. There's a gentleman called Jamie Michael, an ex-soldier, who was also arrested for inciting racial hatred over a video which, frankly, if you watch it, it wasn't hateful at all. He was encouraged by his duty solicitor to plead guilty. It was only because of his own bloody mindedness that he pleaded not guilty until the Free Speech Union could find out about him and furnish him with some proper legal advice. And when he finally ended up going to trial, he was acquitted in 17 minutes. He told me recently he didn't even have enough time for his tea to cool before he was called back in to hear his verdict. So it really does raise a lot of questions about disparities in what advice people are provided with, which that really shouldn't be the difference between someone losing their liberty and not.
Well, thank goodness organisations like the Free Speech Union exist for people when they do get into trouble. They know that there is somewhere to go. There are people who will have their back. Tom Slater, thanks indeed for joining us.
OK, we have some breaking news on this very story right now. Christopher Hope is in the studio. Christopher.
Yes, we're reporting that, of course, Ricky Jones was suspended by Labour. That continues despite the verdict today. So Labour sources have told GB News in the past half an hour that Councillor Ricky Jones was administratively suspended from the Labour Party, and this remains the case, crucially. The investigation is ongoing. The Labour whip was automatically removed when he was suspended, and he will not sit as a Labour councillor. They point out that at the time of his suspension, they said this about Ricky Jones, the party itself: this behaviour is completely unacceptable and it will not be tolerated. The councillor has been suspended from the party. That remains the case.
Just
legally innocent, but politically still a damaging.
I'm just going to say, bring Michael Ellis in on this one. As a former Attorney General, just briefly, what do you make of this situation?
Well, I mean, one of the things that really strikes me is the value of the jury system to all listening to this, because here we've seen an example, and the big difference is that many of the people, like Lucy Connolly, did enter guilty pleas, which meant that the facts were not examined in the same way. Here, a jury examined the facts, they came to their conclusion. But it's interesting to note that Shabana Mahmood, the Labour Justice Secretary, has a plan afoot, which we've talked about here on GB News, to actually stop jury trials in many cases. I think this, and any person like myself who has been a barrister in criminal practice for many years, I was 17 years in criminal practice, would recognise the value of a jury system. And if a person, you or I, any of us, are accused of something, we would want a jury of our peers to make that decision. Here, they've made a decision that many people will disagree with, but that's our system.
Yeah. And made it in half an hour as well, which with the expertise.
Very quick verdict.
It shows the risk of getting rid of jury systems
really
for those concerned. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up.
Millions of families gathered around their wireless sets, and for their loved ones still serving far from home, it was the message a battle-weary world had long prayed for.
As Britain commemorates 80 years since Japan's surrender, marking the end of the Second World War, the King pays tribute to the courage, sacrifice and suffering of those who served, vowing never to forget. But after the break...
Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And that reform includes the electoral system, that reform includes the abomination that is the House of Lords.
He once said he'd scrap it, but now Nigel Farage wants in. With 4 MPs, 10 councils and rising poll numbers, the Reform Party leader is demanding the right to send his own peers to the House of Lords.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racist tonight on the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 28 minutes past 2, and the Reform Party leader, Nigel Farage, is calling on the Prime Minister to allow him to appoint peers to the House of Lords.
Yes, in a letter to the Prime Minister, Farage said he wanted the democratic disparity in the upper chamber to be addressed, suggesting it was unfair that parties with fewer MPs were represented.
Well, joining us now is the writer and former parliamentary clerk, Elliot Wilson. Elliot, thanks for being with us. It does seem strange, does it not, that given there are so many members of the House of Lords, I think around 700, and that Reform has 4 MPs, 10 councils, won the only parliamentary by-election this year, is polling at 30%, not a single member.
Yes, I think Nigel Farage's request is perfectly valid. I mean, I think we have to set aside opinion polls because you can't appoint people to the House of Lords on the basis of something so changeable. But, you know, Reform won 5 seats at the general election. They won the 3rd highest vote. More than 4 million people voted for them. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that they have some representation in the upper house. Every other party which wants to, apart from TUV, does. So, yes, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
And yet, of course, this is in the gift of the Prime Minister. And therefore, we sort of run into the perhaps disincentive structure.
I think actually this puts pressure on Sir Keir Starmer rather than on anyone else, because it is striking that if you look at the House of Lords, there are representatives, not necessarily proportionally, but of every party which would take a seat in the House of Lords, with the exception of Jim Allister's traditional unionist voice. And so I think the Prime Minister does have to answer a question. Why is he, and on what grounds is he refusing to allow Reform UK to nominate people for peerages? He must have a reason for doing so. It can't just be that he doesn't like Nigel Farage, and if it is just that he doesn't like Nigel Farage, that's not good enough. So I think the questions for the Prime Minister say why he won't go along with this.
Respect, Elliot. Why do you think he's not keen on this idea?
I think partly there is clearly a deep antipathy between the Prime Minister and Farage and the whole concept of Reform UK. Keir Starmer came to power with a huge majority last year, and everything has gone wrong for him. You know, his government is at net minus 55 in approval ratings, and I think he sees Reform as agents of a lot of that. And I think he's also, in a weird way, quite conservative. I don't think he likes upsetting the apple cart as he sees it in quite a liberal, progressive way. I also don't think he's very interested in the House of Lords. I mean, they've got the bill going through which will remove the remaining hereditary peers, and I suspect after that, any interest in reform of the House of Lords will miraculously disappear.
Elliot, didn't Reform at one point want to abolish the House of Lords? Is there an element of hypocrisy here?
Their position, as I understand it, is they want to make it more democratic, but they haven't committed to any details. But, you know, far be it from me to defend Reform UK, but I think one of the most important aspects of politics is you have to play the game according to the rules as they exist. Currently, the House of Lords however constituted, is the upper chamber of Parliament. It's not unreasonable for Reform to say we should be in there able to at least have our say on legislation. I mean, we're not talking about tens of peers. I think a modest sort of 10 Reform peers would be a reasonable number. But you know, they should have some representation in the upper house, given that they represent more than 4 million voters.
OK, well, Elliot Wilson, a writer and former parliamentary clerk, really appreciate your thoughts on this matter.
Now, VJ Day events are happening across the country to commemorate 80 years ago since Japan surrendering to the Allies, marking the end of the Second World War.
Well, in a national address, King Charles paid tribute to the so-called Forgotten Army before visiting memorials and meeting members of VJ associations at the National Memoriam Arboretum. And we can go there now because Jack Carson, our reporter, is there for us. Jack.
Thank you very much. Well, we're here at a section of the Burma Railway. You can probably see the public that have now been led into this area, all coming to pay their respects. You can probably see a few of the wreaths as well. This is also where His Majesty the King's wreath has now been moved to a short while ago. He was here visiting this part of the Arboretum known as the Far East Corner, reflecting and remembering, of course, those who never came home from the Far East and the Pacific, serving in places like Burma, as we, of course, today commemorate victory over Japan 80 years ago. I'm delighted to be joined by Philippa Rawlinson, who's the Director of Remembrance at the Royal British Legion, reflecting on today's service, a hugely emotional day, but so significant as well that His Majesty the King and Queen were here to be part of it with more than 30 veterans.
Absolutely, we know it was wonderful to have the veterans with us, as you say, over 30 of them, 98 to 105, and to have both 105-year-olds taking part in the service. Didn't they capture all of our hearts? But of course, having RBL's patron, His Majesty the King, with us as well, really means a lot to the veterans.
And we celebrated Victory in Europe Day, and I think sometimes people maybe forget that when Victory in Europe was being celebrated, there were hundreds of thousands of men from Britain and the Commonwealth still fighting. And so it's so important that today we remember those who never came home, remember those who were able to come home, and those that served, because as we heard in the King's address today, many of them were known as the Forgotten Army.
Yes, I mean, every day at the National Memorial Arboretum we are remembering them. They're not the Forgotten Army here, because we have all these memorials and we see people coming to pay their respects year round. And of course we were here 5 years ago when I had the pleasure of accompanying His Majesty around the zone, the Far East Zone, just an hour or so ago. We were reflecting on the very poignant service which His Majesty led at the Burma Railway, and where he laid his wreath in person on that day. So it is something that we at the Royal British Legion and at the Arboretum really take to heart and make sure that we are paying tribute to those that fought in the Far East. I mean, we've been hearing today how tough things were for them and the civilian internees. They will not be forgotten here.
As it was such a difficult climate for them. We spoke to a veteran earlier on, and that level of training he was able to get in Britain before he was sent out there would be nothing that could compare to the kind of climate and the jungle warfare, often behind enemy lines, that they were having to go through. When you were here with His Majesty not long ago, what were some of the things you know, that maybe you could tell us that you were touching on? What was the King maybe pointing out as you of course accompanied him not long ago to this memorial here?
Well, just before we came across the Burma Star Memorial, the Burma Railway, and then went on to the Burma Star, we were talking to two of the service participants who had been laying wreaths during the service and had waited here to meet His Majesty, and they were both laying wreaths to remember their grandfathers who had fought from the African regiments and also Gurkha, and in fact one is a third generation Gurkha that's here today. So he was talking to them about their grandfather's service and what they would have gone through, and their the tough times that they would have had, but them coming together as that united, diverse fighting force to give us all the freedoms that we enjoy today.
Philippa Rawlinson, Director of Remembrance at the Royal British Legion, thank you so much for joining us on such a poignant day, and it's been such an emotional service today here at the Royal British Legion's event, of course, to mark in Japan 80 years ago.
Jack Carson, thanks very much for being there for us.
Sterling job. It's a very emotional day there. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show.
Millions of families gathered around their wireless sets, and for their loved ones still serving far from home, It was the message a battle-weary world had long prayed for.
Yes, as the King pays tribute to the courage, sacrifice and suffering of those who served, we'll be getting more reaction after your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon to you. Our headlines. President Trump is on his way to Alaska for talks with Vladimir Putin. The US president has highlighted the importance of the Ukraine war summit with a two-word post on social media that says, high stakes. Mr. Trump says any swapping of territory will be discussed, but the final decision lies with Ukraine. The King and Queen joined veterans at a memorial service on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day earlier. Charles and Camilla, along with the Prime Minister, laid wreaths at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay their respects to those who served in the Far East and Pacific during the Second World War. Suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been found not guilty at Snaresbrook Crown Court of encouraging violent disorder after calling for far-right protesters' throats to be cut at an anti-racism rally in the wake of rioting following the Southport murders. All flights at Manchester Airport were halted earlier following a collision between two EasyJet planes which clipped wings while taxiing to the runway. An investigation's underway. And social media influencers will be used to help the government highlight the risks of travelling abroad for cosmetic surgery. The new campaign on TikTok will explain how tummy tucks and dental treatments can go wrong overseas. That's it for the moment. More news coming up for you a little later.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday, today dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, and increasingly some low cloud starting to lap onto the eastern coast of England as the day progresses. Hot sunshine elsewhere. And although the cooler breeze across parts of northern and eastern UK will bring about average temperatures, high teens, low 20s, we'll still see much higher than average temperatures, high 20s and possible 31 Celsius across southern parts of the UK. Meanwhile, there will still be one or two showers developing across parts of eastern Scotland, but nowhere near on the scale of Thursday's downpours. And most places will be dry, albeit rather cloudy, especially for eastern and central Scotland. Some sunshine for the Western Isles as well as for Northern Ireland, but plenty of sunshine there for much of England and Wales, although some coastal parts of the North Sea there seeing some cloud. And that cloud will tend to creep back in after dark. In fact, it will become fairly extensive across the eastern half of the UK, certainly, perhaps reaching as far as the West Midlands or even East Wales overnight. And under that cloud, temperatures will stay at 16 or 17 Celsius. Even with the clear spells elsewhere, it's still going to be a warm night and a pleasant start to the weekend for many of us, although a lot of cloud will persist during the morning, especially for much of eastern Scotland, into eastern England as well. It will lift and break, but I think some places will keep the cloud into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere, still hot in the southwest, cooler elsewhere.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Closures affect drivers on the northbound A725 slip from Belsey Hill roundabout. Roadworks cause traffic diversions, so expect longer travel times. In Worcestershire, an accident on the M5 northbound between junctions 6 and 5 overturned a vehicle, blocking one lane. Travellers should expect delays until it clears. M25 anti-clockwise between junctions 3 and 2 in Kent faces 30-minute delays due to congestion. Motorists should consider alternate routes. And on the trains, disruptions impact services between Leamington Spa and Banbury. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Hello, good afternoon, Britain. It is 14:42, just coming up. Lots of you have been getting in touch about VJ Day and sending in your own memories, and very emotional as well. Les says, VJ Day, Dad came back to the UK sometime in September 1945 after fighting in Burma. At arriving at the RAF UK base, there was no food, no accommodation, no change of clothes for them. They were truly the forgotten army. R.I.P. Dad. Meanwhile, Lynn says, my aunt told me years ago that the prisoners of war in Japan were brought back to the UK the long way round, sailing east so they could put on some weight, so they said they didn't look too bad when they arrived home, so we didn't have to see them suffering like that. Very emotional memories there. It's a very emotional day, and please do keep them coming in at gbnews.com/your say.
But of course, events are happening across the country today to commemorate this 80-year anniversary since Japan's surrender, marking the official end to the Second World War.
Yeah, in a national address, King Charles has paid tribute to the so-called forgotten army. I don't think we can say so-called. I think they are the forgotten army almost, before visiting memorials and meeting members of the VJ associations at the National Memorial Arboretum.
Well, joining us now are our reporters. Well, Doogie Beattie is in Lisbon for us. Doogie, this has been a big moment for so many people, and this anniversary, so important. Probably the last big anniversary that those who were there will be able to commemorate with the country.
Completely correct, Tom, and we must not forget what they gave up, what they went through. Not only those that fought there, of course. Don't forget, when the Japanese went to war, all of Asia were treated brutally at that stage. Many Asians being took prisoner, executed, and it was at that point that many of our forces were in Singapore. And of course they also fell and were took prisoner by the Japanese, as we heard earlier from one man. Some of them made to walk 200 miles in their bare feet to Burma. It must have been absolutely horrific what those people went through in war. Particularly that war. And this morning we were joined by representatives of His Majesty was Gaughan Hamilton, the Lord Lieutenant. We had Gillian Anderson, Baroness Anderson, the House of Lords representative to Northern Ireland, Labour peer. We had the Royal British Legion, and we had those from society right across Northern Ireland. But most importantly, we had a lot of young people here that were being taught exactly what went on then and what their forefathers sacrificed that they might live in the society that they live in. In fact, just at this moment in time, there is a bit of a ceremony going on inside with video, etc., showing those young people what was faced in Japan. And for all of that, one of those main things that I felt the most emotional about was the quite simple laying of a wreath. And I spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Thompson about his thoughts on that.
It's a very poignant moment for anybody that has served or is still serving, and you saw the veterans here today. I think your mind always goes back to colleagues and friends served with, and certainly the ones that gave the ultimate sacrifice across the world. But we have to remember that today actually is a celebration because it's the end of the conflict in Japan, that victory in Japan, the 80th anniversary. So you're absolutely right, we do remember everybody that gave the ultimate sacrifice, and certainly if you had a close connection to them. But we have to think that that was the end of that conflict, and our friends returned home to their families.
And with that, out of a lieutenant commander, you are lieutenant colonel, you have to think of our own veterans nowadays that have came back home from conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and they also have seen real inhumane treatment of people. And are we looking after them? Is it enough to put a poppy on a monument and look at that, or should we be taking better care of them when they're here to appreciate it?
Really, really important and poignant points there. Dougie Beattie, thanks indeed for joining us live from Lisbon.
And I just want to read one more message out from you. So many of you are getting your messages coming in now, and I'm finding them incredibly emotional. Clive says, my uncle was a Japanese prisoner of war and told me that he had to eat grass to survive. He's sadly no longer with us, R.I.P. And Roy says, my uncle Charles was a prisoner of war of the Japanese. He never told us about it, never spoke about it. We know what he put on shows for his fellow prisoners, and a costume he made is now on display at the Imperial War Museum. God bless them all. Indeed, I think that sums it up.
Such lovely stories. Thank you so much for sending in all of your memories there. Well, still a little bit more to come on this programme, so let's catch up with the European travel weather, and we'll see you in a minute.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Temperatures easing a little bit in Spain and Portugal, but it's still going to be pretty hot for the next few days. Pretty humid in Italy with the threat of a few scattered heavy thundery showers. Dry and sunny in Spain and Portugal. As I said, though, temperatures just dropping a little bit here over the next few days. Could be quite breezy for Sicily and parts of northern Tunisia. A bit of a breeze blowing over the Greek islands as well, but plenty of sunshine likely here. Continued risk of a few showers for Italy and Croatia.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record, you say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Wake up with a familiar face. She's back on breakfast television. Penny Smith returns.
Miss me? Well, I'm here and I brought the coffee.
And we're reuniting to brighten your morning.
It's just like old times, only better.
So join Penny and me next Monday and Tuesday only on GB News Breakfast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is, 10 to 3. Now, comedians continue to chase the best joke of the Fringe title at Edinburgh, world-famous festival. Oh, God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Tom, have you heard of any good ones?
Oh, this is always difficult, isn't it, when you don't have an audience, when you're not warmed up. But let's read this one out.
OK.
I proposed to my wife while Neil Diamond was playing, which is perfect, really, as his name is in itself a brief set of instructions for the ideal proposal. Neil Diamond.
Was that one of the better ones?
That was by comedian Simon Evans, which was great. I think that's a good one.
Yes, no, it's, yeah.
Although one did actually make me laugh out loud in the newsroom earlier. Everyone is worried about AI. But I'm more concerned about what the other vowels are up to.
You did like that one, didn't you?
I really did.
That is a very Tom joke, to be fair.
That was by the comedian Rob Orton.
Yeah, no, that is a very, very Tom joke. I mean, Tom spent, before we came on the show, doing AI versions of us, which included The Simpsons.
Yes, I've got another one. James Bond's secret agent number is 007, or +447 when he's overseas.
Oh, God! Those nights must fly by in Edinburgh.
That was Beck Hill.
You missed your vacation.
OK, how about this one? He said, lie back and think of England. Unfortunately for me, I thought of Swindon.
Why is that funny?
I think it's supposed to be because it's not a particularly romantic idea.
What's wrong with Swindon?
Nothing wrong with Swindon. Lorna Rose Treen thinks
that's very Swindonist, I think.
Wow, OK. I see you're being miserable today. OK. Oh, well, do we have...
Is there any more? Any more for any more, Tom Howard?
Oh, that one's not appropriate. How can I have mummy issues when we've successfully shared a bed for over 36 years?
OK, on that note, thank you so much for watching.
Mr.
Good afternoon, Britain. He's been Tom, I've been Dawn. Don't go anywhere. It's Martin Daubney to save your sanity. Martin, what's coming up?
Sorry, just laughing at your jokes there. Beautiful stuff, guys. Very, very good. On my show today, an astonishing GB News exclusive. A man with links to the Houthi rebels, an Islamic organisation. An asylum seeker now. Guess where? In RAF Wethersfield in Essex. We have astonishing pictures of this man allegedly with guns, AK-47s, knives. If GB News can find him, if this guy's in the country, why can't your authorities find him? How many others like him may there be? Plus, victory for Michelle Dewberry. Do you remember she resigned her membership from Virgin Gyms because a bloke got his bits out in the female changing room? Well, not only has Dubes won for herself, but there's been an astonishing victory for all women. I'll be joined by Dubes on the show. And also the establishment versus Reform. Will they throw everything at Reform to keep them out of power? I'll be joined by Reform's Zia Youssef. That's all coming 3 till 6. But first, it's your weather forecast. See you soon.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Following the torrential thunderstorms that parts of eastern Scotland saw on Thursday, today dry for most, cooler in the north and across some eastern coasts, but hot sunshine developing elsewhere. High pressure building back in, so it's a settled picture, but a lot of cloud for parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland,